comienza con una pregunta. ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué tengo que caminar si puedo montar a caballo? ¿Por qué ir en caballo si puedo ir en tren? ¿Por qué viajar en tren si puedo volar? Y si puedo volar, ¿por qué quedarme en la tierra? La humanidad avanza cuando alguno de nosotros pregunta, piensa, cuestiona o busca una nueva solución. Cuando nos rehusamos a aceptar la respuesta usual y sin importar el que dirán gritamos. ¿Por qué? No son las respuestas las que nos hacen crecer, sino las preguntas. Pregúntate, ¿por qué el mundo cambió cuando alguien como tú se preguntó ¿por qué?
¿Ya eres parte de la nueva red BI? La red en donde puedes transferir tan fácil como enviar un emoji. Solamente tienes que descargar o actualizar BI en línea app. Ingresar a la opción de transferencias móviles. Completar tu perfil cargando tu mejor fotografía y seleccionando tu cuenta principal. Agrega como favoritos a los contactos que desees. Y listo. Ahora podrás enviar o recibir transferencias acreditadas directamente a tu cuenta principal utilizando tu número de celular. ¿Qué esperas para unirte? Invita a tus amigos a registrarse en transferencias móviles desde BI en línea app y transfiéreles con tan solo conocer su número de celular. Banco Industrial, siempre de tu lado, siempre hacia adelante.
Creemos que una gran nación empieza en el hogar. Es solo ahí, en el hogar, donde la palabra futuro puede adquirir un nuevo significado. Con esta visión en el corazón, existimos sabiendo que cada acción que tomamos debe hacernos mejores y tener un impacto positivo en las comunidades en las que operamos. Desde una sonrisa de bienvenida hasta cuando apoyamos a nuestros artesanos en su emprendimiento. Somos mejores cuando participamos activamente, forjando la promesa de un futuro mejor para nuestros niños. Guatemala no es solo nuestro país, es nuestro hogar. Y cada día tenemos la oportunidad de ser padres, madres, hijos, hermanos, en un hogar que se merece todo. Trabajemos duro, llevemos un poquito de honor y amor a nuestro hogar. Aguate, nuestro hogar.
Llegó la nueva aplicación Tap & Go de Bisanet para que puedas cobrar con tarjeta sin contacto desde tu celular. Comunícate con nosotros. Bisanet Guatemala.
En Grupo A, generamos el contenido que necesitas para conectar con las audiencias clave, con más de 11 años de experiencia. Grupo A está conformado por diversos medios que nos han posicionado como uno de los líderes en el mercado de la comunicación. Somos el socio comercial ideal para cumplir tus objetivos. Nos hemos ganado la confianza de los hogares guatemaltecos y queremos ser el medio para que tú llegues a ellos. Logra tus objetivos con Grupo A.
Muy buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Mónica Río Nevado de Zelaya. Yo soy decana de la Facultad de Ciencias Económicas de la Universidad Francisco Marroquín. Me toca el día de hoy darles la bienvenida a este gran evento, el Business Day. El Business Day es parte de un conjunto de eventos que la facultad viene haciendo y la universidad viene haciendo y organizando desde hace ya varios años. Esta es nuestra tercera edición del Business Day y antes de esto teníamos otros eventos denominados Marketing Day y algunas otras versiones. ¿Cuál es el propósito de estos eventos? El propósito de estos eventos es acercar a la comunidad empresarial en Guatemala y también en otras partes del mundo que están conectadas el día de hoy. ¿Cuáles son las tendencias de negocios que se resaltan más en los últimos días? ¿Cuáles son las grandes preocupaciones que pueden observar los gerentes, los líderes de negocios hoy en día? ¿Y cuáles son aquellas grandes oportunidades que estando más cerca de ellas, cerca de personas que conocen esto desde la profundidad y con muchísimo nivel profesional, pueden compartir esos conocimientos y de alguna manera acercarlos a ustedes para que puedan aprovecharlos no solo esta tarde, sino en el futuro cercano? Sabemos que estamos viviendo momentos desafiantes y en realidad la Universidad Francisco Marroquín tiene una cercanía permanente con personas de primer nivel que conocen a profundidad muchos de estos conceptos o lo han vivido en sus experiencias personales. Desde hace algunos años pensamos, ¿y por qué no hacer un evento que permita acercar a muchas personas la oportunidad de aprender de estos expertos? Así que así nació la idea de Business Day. Y el segundo propósito, y no por eso menos importante, era también contribuir con un programa de becas llamado Impulso al Talento Académico, las becas ITA de la Universidad Francisco Marroquín. El programa de becas ITA es un programa lindísimo. De hecho, dentro de un momento vamos a poder ver un pequeño video donde nos explica un poquito sobre lo que es este programa de becas. Yo en lo personal siempre digo que vivo agradecida con Dios por la oportunidad que me ha dado de conocer a estos jóvenes maravillosos que tienen grandísimo talento, que tienen un gran potencial de liderazgo y literalmente deseos de comerse el mundo. Y no tienen la oportunidad de llegar a hacer estudios universitarios. Como ustedes saben, en Guatemala, menos del 1% de la población tiene acceso a educación universitaria. Así que un programa de becas como este le abre la oportunidad a muchos jóvenes que tienen mucho talento para cambiar su propia vida, la vida de su familia, la vida de sus comunidades y, por qué no decirlo, la vida de nuestro querido país, Guatemala. Hablemos un poquito sobre ese Business Day. El día de hoy presentamos un evento que se llama How to Rise in the New Era. Y la verdad es que sí, estamos el día de hoy enfrente de un gran desafío. El mundo cambió el año pasado y nos está retando a dar lo mejor de cada uno de nosotros. No solo está retando nuestros conocimientos, nuestra experiencia, lo que cada uno de nosotros podemos hacer. Está retando también esas habilidades que de alguna manera hemos ido construyendo a lo largo del camino. Está retando la manera en que nos aproximamos a poder poner sobre la mesa nuevas oportunidades de negocio que resuelvan problemas para muchas personas, o la forma en que debemos liderar en los tiempos actuales, o el rol que juega la inteligencia artificial a lo largo de este camino. Y por qué no decirlo, cómo nosotros enfrentamos estos desafíos. Nosotros queremos que el día de hoy puedan disfrutar de este evento que hemos preparado con muchísimo cariño y cuidado, Nosotros decimos que en la Universidad Francisco Marroquín siempre se distingue por buscar hacer las cosas con excelencia, por invitar a este entorno a personas de clase mundial que con sus conocimientos y experiencia, pero también con muchísima humildad, puedan venir a estos foros y compartir lo que ellos han aprendido, los retos que han vivido o las grandes teorías que han podido ver desarrolladas cerca de ellos en el ejercicio profesional. Y por último, buscamos siempre la innovación. Así que el evento de Businessday, que la primera vez que se hizo fue presencial, hoy por segundo año consecutivo lo hacemos de manera virtual. Esto nos abrió oportunidades de traer incluso a personas con mayor y más alto perfil que puedan estar con nosotros esta tarde. Así que sin más ni más, quiero pedir en un momento que nos ayuden a mostrar el video del programa de Becasita, que como decimos, el Business Day no es un evento o un seminario cualquiera, es este evento de doble propósito, aprender y disfrutar esta tarde que están con nosotros, poder compartir estos conocimientos con personas de sus propias empresas o de sus propios equipos y contribuir de manera directa a un programa tan maravilloso como el programa de Becasita. Así que en este momento verán ustedes ese video que nos explica un poquito sobre este programa de becas. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos y los veo en un momento.
Que uno da a la juventud de mi comunidad, porque el hecho de que una persona de ese lugar donde las oportunidades muchas veces se ven cerradas, donde las oportunidades tal vez ni existen, y ver que una persona ha logrado esto, ha servido a muchos jóvenes que puedan creer en sus sueños y que sepan que hay medios y que hay formas de poder alcanzar lo que uno se propone.
Camadita es mejor que ganarse la lotería. Ha sido una de las mayores bendiciones que he recibido en mi vida. Lo que el programa ha hecho por mí yo no se los podría pagar ni aunque les devolviera todo el dinero que eso ha significado. Todos esos intangibles que me han dado y que me han permitido cambiar mi vida, cambiar la vida de mi familia y poder de alguna manera ayudar a otras personas que han estado en mi círculo de influencia.
A las personas que hicieron una donación, o muy grande o muy pequeña, para que yo pudiera estudiar, lo que les diría es que no me alcanzaría la vida y ni los años que Dios me dé para agradecerles por lo que hicieron por mí, por mi familia, por mi comunidad y por el país. Hicieron una inversión y esa inversión yo me comprometo a seguir retornándola con cada vez mejores cosas para las comunidades, para mi familia, para mí misma, incluso para los próximos becados que puedan venir a este programa.
Pues miren, cada vez que yo veo este video, de verdad, mientras lo estaba escuchando, estaba pensando, uy, que no me emocione demasiado porque cada una de estas personas que conocimos en este corto video son ejemplos de vida, de vidas que se han multiplicado en inspirar a otras personas de su propia familia o de sus propias comunidades. Guatemala necesita personas capaces que estén preparadas para enfrentar retos. Vivimos en un país de muchas dificultades y yo siempre digo a la vez de muchas oportunidades, con profesionales capaces. Literalmente Guatemala y cada uno de nuestros propios guatemaltecos y de las personas individuales que pertenecen a este país puede salir adelante. Así que les agradecemos muchísimo a los donantes que han confiado en nosotros y como decía Evelyn en este video, donaciones pequeñas o grandes. Por eso en este evento no ponemos un monto, lo dejamos abierto para que cada persona se sienta en la libertad de donar lo que pueda y quiera donar en este momento o incluso también después. Así que muchas gracias por confiar en la Universidad Francisco Marroquín y en cada uno de los miembros del programa ITA. Tengo que decir, antes de pasar la palabra a presentar al primero de los guest speakers que tenemos acá, que de verdad son personas increíbles, que esto no hubiese sido posible si no hubiésemos tenido el apoyo de los patrocinadores que el día de hoy nos acompañan. Quiero mencionar a cada uno de ellos agradeciéndoles por confiar en este evento y ayudando a hacer la diferencia para Guatemala. Banco Industrial, CBC, Visanet, Semaco, Pacífico.com, FranklinCovey con el FranklinCovey Leadership Center y Cementos Progreso. Adicional, debemos mencionar a los colaboradores de medios o media collaborators. Ellos son New Media, quienes están a cargo el día de hoy de todo lo que es la edición digital de este evento, Prensa Libre, Canal Antigua y Guatemala.com. Sin cada uno de ellos, este evento realmente hubiera sido imposible. En este momento, quiero además hacer un agradecimiento para cada uno de los 4 conferencistas que el día de hoy nos va a acompañar. Ellos están contribuyendo con el tiempo que dedican acá para hacer del aprendizaje de ustedes y de la experiencia en el Business Day una experiencia memorable y extraordinaria, como son justamente el tipo de experiencias que nos gusta construir en la Universidad Francisco Marroquín, para estudiantes, para graduados y para toda la comunidad empresarial. Cierro entonces invitándolos a que mientras escuchan cada una de las conferencias, hagan lo mismo que hizo el fundador de la universidad o lo que originó a esta universidad, y es háganse buenas preguntas. Queremos que a lo largo de las conferencias se disparen en ustedes muchas inquietudes nuevas, muchas nuevas ideas y sobre todo muchas preguntas que los van a ayudar a crecer y de la misma manera impactar en todas aquellas personas que tienen cerca. Bienvenidos a Business Day 2021. Y con ustedes, Carolina Uribe, directora del Departamento de Administración de Empresas de la Universidad Francisco Marroquín y además quien lidera al equipo que el día de hoy ha montado este maravilloso evento, a quienes también quiero agradecer para poder arrancar. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Nos vemos en un momento. Con ustedes, Carolina.
Hola a todos, muy buenas tardes y es un gran gusto estar aquí. Gracias, Mónica, por esa presentación. Yo también quería agradecer a Mónica y agradecer a todo mi equipo. La verdad es que ha sido un esfuerzo increíble y emocionante que nos hemos gozado. Para nosotros es un privilegio poder organizar este tipo de eventos. Así que muy emocionada de poder celebrar y compartir este evento tan importante con todos ustedes. Ahora tengo el gran honor de presentar a nuestro primer invitado. Nuestro primer invitado es René Scull. René es el líder de Rapp para el área de negocios. René es un ejecutivo y emprendedor con una muy amplia experiencia en tecnología, gerencia, ventas y marketing, tanto digital como tradicional, en roles globales y regionales. René tiene experiencia en desarrollo de negocios, estrategia y marketing en empresas tradicionales y tecnológicas. Él fue el líder de Uber for Business en Uber para el mercado mexicano, una unidad de negocios estratégica para la empresa. René también cuenta con una amplia experiencia en marketing, pues él fue gerente de marca y director de marca en varias multinacionales, entre ellas P&G o Procter & Gamble, Despegar.com, Aprovecha.com y Diageo. René es de Venezuela y él tiene un título en Administración de Empresas de la Universidad Metropolitana de Venezuela en Caracas y un MBA de Harvard Business School. Así que tenemos el gran gusto de tener a René con nosotros. René, bienvenido. Va a ser un gusto escucharte y te dejo el tiempo.
Hola, un gran gusto estar aquí con ustedes. Yo le tengo una gran afinidad a la gente de Guatemala, al pueblo de Guatemala, digo muchas veces, una gente muy cariñosa, y también le tengo mucha afinidad ideológica a la Universidad Francisco Marroquín y estoy muy contento de poder apoyar con el programa de becas, que de verdad que es increíble. Entonces, vamos a empezar mi presentación, esperamos un segundito. Ok, perdón. Primera, a ver. Es que voy a entrar por otro, déjame entrar por otro ley de Murphy aquí. Otra computadora, dame un sonito.
Aló. Ok, entonces vamos a compartir la pantalla. Listo, ahí se ve mi pantalla. Ok, perfecto. Listo. Mi charla de hoy se titula Las tendencias post-COVID. 4 trillones de dólares. 4 trillones de dólares es el monto que aumentó el balance de los Estados Unidos, del Federal Reserve, en los últimos 15 meses. En tan solo, en solo un mes del año pasado, en junio, los Estados Unidos imprimió más dinero, más dólares nominales que en los 200 años, desde 1776 hasta 1976, desde la fundación de los Estados Unidos hasta la fecha presente. Esta consecuencia de cómo los Estados Unidos imprimió tanto dinero va a tener muchas consecuencias en Latinoamérica, en el mundo, en los Estados Unidos, porque como dicen, cuando los Estados Unidos estornuda, el mundo se engripa. Hoy voy a ver 4 tendencias que yo veo mientras entramos en el mundo post-COVID y sus consecuencias en América Latina. La primera gran tendencia que veo es la inflación. Como podemos ver en el Consumer Price Index, tocó 4% en mes de abril. Esto es el aumento más importante mes a mes de los últimos de 40 años. Desde 1982, el Consumer Price Index no había aumentado tanto como ahora. Aunque el Fed dice que este tema es transitorio, producto de la demanda represada durante tantos meses de la pandemia, hay muchas voces que piensan que no lo es así, por varias razones. La primera es que la expectativa en cambios de precios de la población ha aumentado dramáticamente. Podemos ver cómo hasta de los últimos 5 años estaban niveles de 2 y pico por ciento de la inflación esperada y ahorita está en más de 4%. Y el tema con esto que crea un ciclo vicioso, porque las personas piensan que va a haber piensan que va a haber aumento de precios, exigen más salarios, las compañías aumentan los precios para poder pagar esos salarios y empieza el ciclo otra vez también. El segundo tema importante que contradice lo que dice la Fed es el tema de la cadena de suministro. Hoy en día las cadenas de suministro están seriamente afectadas. Nunca en la historia había pasado que tantas industrias distintas, desde celulares, chips, bicicletas, hasta químicos, estuvieran con tantas restricciones en su cadena de suministro al mismo tiempo. Es algo sin precedentes. Podemos ver aquí cómo las palabras de Mark Pitzer, el CEO de Whirlpool, dice...
René, perdón que te interrumpa.
Upside down. Podemos ver aquí también...
René, ¿me escuchas ahí?
Esperando descargar en el puerto de Los Ángeles. Esto es algo que nunca ha pasado y, sin lugar a duda, va a tener muchas consecuencias en los precios. Tanto así que, por ejemplo, las compañías están abandonando políticas muy establecidas en su política de inventario, como era Just-in-Time Inventory, a tener más colchones. Esto
René, ¿tú me escuchas o no?
Y va a tener repercusiones en los precios. Sin embargo, para Latinoamérica no todo es malo, y especialmente para Guatemala, porque este aumento de precios está afectando positivamente a varias commodities importantes que Guatemala produce, como por ejemplo banana, café, azúcar. Podemos ver cómo ha tenido un repunte importante en los últimos meses. La segunda tendencia que veo, producto del post-COVID, es la inestabilidad política. La historia nos enseña que luego de pandemias, por ejemplo, un estudio del Fondo Monetario Internacional de 133 países hizo un estudio de cómo se comportaron después de pandemias, por ejemplo, del SARS, del SIX, del Zika, y el resultado de ese estudio es que la inestabilidad política fue un gran, que se activó mucho. Si combinamos ese factor...
René, ¿tú me escuchas ahí, no?
De precios, que estaba comentando anteriormente, esto es gasolina para la inestabilidad política. Aquí podemos ver cómo están subiendo los commodities en el último año y digo que es gasolina para la inestabilidad política, especialmente para Latinoamérica, porque aquí podemos ver el porcentaje que representa la comida sobre los alimentos, sobre el gasto total de una casa. Y como podemos ver, en Guatemala, la comida representa más del 40% del gasto total de la casa, mientras en los Estados Unidos es solo el 6%. Lo que significa que para nuestra región va a afectar seriamente el tema de este aumento de alimentos y mucho más que en países desarrollados. Y esto es gasolina para la inestabilidad política, como dije anteriormente. Gasolina que va a ser explotado al máximo por factores de la izquierda, aprovechándose todo este malestar que ha habido durante estos meses de pandemia, más el aumento de los alimentos y vamos a esperar mucho más en el futuro. Bueno, y como lo vimos en Chile, en las protestas del año pasado y los resultados de la constituyente que hubo el domingo, donde la izquierda ganó, arrasó. Lo estamos viendo en Perú, donde el candidato de la ultraizquierda está liderizando las encuestas para las elecciones ahorita en junio. Lo vimos en Colombia durante los disturbios y los saqueos durante las últimas semanas. Y esto es algo, una tendencia que esperamos que, aunque no la deseamos, pero es algo que va a pasar en los próximos años y meses en la región, sin lugar a duda. La tercera tendencia que quiero hablar hoy es de la innovación tecnológica. La innovación tecnológica, si vemos la historia de las pandemias, normalmente son periodos donde se innova, donde hay mucha innovación. Por ejemplo, en la pandemia, en la gripe negra, en la peste negra en Europa, que fue una de las peores pandemias que azotó la humanidad, el 40% de la población de los europeos murieron durante esta pandemia, se le atribuye a grandes avances en la medicina, la invención de los relojes, de los lentes y hasta de la imprenta. Y esta pandemia no es distinto, especialmente tomando en cuenta adicional que es el aumento de liquidez. Mucho se ha ido, que hablamos anteriormente, se ha ido hacia los mercados capitales y los mercados de venture funding. Como podemos ver, en el 2020, el venture funding global o el fondeo hacia emprendimientos aumentó un 4% versus el año anterior. Esto en plena pandemia. Lo que implica que se está fondeando a muchísimos emprendimientos nuevos en la región y en el mundo. En la región, si vemos, el rey del Internet se llama Mercado Libre. La valoración de Internet es más, la valoración de Mercado Libre es más de 70 billones de dólares. También vemos que en la región hay más de 18 unicornios o startups que valen más de $1 billón, lo que implica que hay un gran movimiento de emprendimiento. Si vemos cómo tuvo este fondeo de los venture capitalists en el 2020, el 40% de la inversión fue hacia el sector fintech. El sector fintech ha crecido mucho en Latinoamérica porque los bancos, la banca tradicional es muy lenta, es muy rígida y hay un gran porcentaje de la población que no está bancarizado. Por ejemplo, Rapp, donde yo trabajo, estamos participando activamente en este sector. Ahorita sacamos una tarjeta de crédito que desde que la pides en el app hasta que te llega a tu casa dura 60 minutos. Algo verdaderamente impresionante. Otra parte de fintech que ha crecido muchísimo es el cripto. El cripto ha tenido una gran actividad en estos tiempos y hay tecnologías nuevas como el DeFi o el Decentralized Finance que están o van a revolucionar el mundo, desde cosas como pedir préstamos inmediato en un app en 5 minutos hasta cómo vamos a votar en el futuro. Yo como soy de Venezuela y en Venezuela cuando se destruyó la moneda, la adopción del cripto ha sido impresionante. En Argentina también pasa lo mismo. Y actualmente hay una compañía en México que se llama Bitso, que en su última ronda la valoraron en $2.2 billones. Entonces, lo que está pasando en el mundo cripto es verdaderamente impresionante, muy tumultuoso, como hemos visto en estos días donde las monedas han fluctuado mucho, pero sin lugar a dudas es algo que está aquí para quedarse. Y también muchos ven paralelismos en lo que está pasando en los Estados Unidos con toda esta impresión de dinero y el aumento de la valoración del cripto. Otros sectores en la región que están creciendo muchísimo es el food tech, es el health tech, que es la telemedicina, y el edtech, que es el aprendizaje a distancia. Estos crecieron el año pasado 148% el edtech y Health Tech creció 108% versus el año anterior. Entonces, como podemos ver en la región, hay un gran auge de innovación y en el mundo entero. Lo bueno es que para Latinoamérica representa una oportunidad muy importante todavía. Se espera que la penetración del Internet aumente a 25% al final de esta década versus el 6% donde está hoy, lo que representa una oportunidad de 210 billones de dólares a ser capitalizada por todos nosotros. La cuarta tendencia que quisiera comentar hoy es sobre la tensión China-Estados Unidos. Si vemos este cuadro donde vemos el cambio del Producto Interno Bruto, del GDP, Gross Domestic Product, en el 2020, de las top 10 economías del año pasado, la única que creció fue China, que es algo verdaderamente insólito porque, como todos sabemos, fue donde se originó el virus. Por lo que pareciera que China es el gran ganador de esta pandemia. Y los números cuando vemos de China son verdaderamente impresionantes. Desde 1980, cuando empezaron las reformas de economía de mercado en China, hasta la fecha, se ha duplicado la economía china cada 7 años. En este mismo periodo, también se han sacado 500 millones de personas de la pobreza, algo nunca visto en la humanidad, unas magnitudes increíbles. También se dice que China está produciendo un billonario nuevo todas las semanas. Y bueno, y todos vimos cómo en la pandemia construyeron hospitales, edificios en cuestión de días y lograron controlar ferozmente la pandemia. Este crecimiento de China o la reacción de China la han valentonado en el último año especialmente, con dos temas, con dos maneras, vamos a llamarla así. Una es el hard power y la otra es el soft power. Por ejemplo, en el hard power podemos ver cómo China echó para atrás un tratado que tenía con Inglaterra para controlar completamente a Hong Kong y reprimir las libertades que había en esa isla. También podemos ver cómo se ha enfrentado con la India en las Himalayas. Sus tropas tuvieron un conflicto en los últimos meses. A Taiwán, China está constantemente amenazándola y sus barcos han llegado hasta Ecuador, hasta los Galápagos. Entonces China está en una posición bastante envalentonada con todo este tema del hard power. Pero no solo actúa con el hard power, también actúa con el soft power. China, por ejemplo, está usando lo que se llama la diplomacia de la vaccina, donde han entregado más de 700 millones de dosis al mundo, mientras los Estados Unidos, por ejemplo, ha entregado solo 3 millones de dosis. Algo verdaderamente impresionante, ya que, bueno, el virus salió de China y ahorita están utilizando el mismo virus para ganarse puntos con los países en la región. También podemos ver la última semana cómo, por ejemplo, el presidente de El Salvador anunció que el gobierno chino estaba invirtiendo 500 millones de dólares en inversión pública en El Salvador. Y también podemos ver cómo respondió Julie Chang del Department of State de los Estados Unidos, donde le responde: señor presidente, nada de China viene sin condiciones. Entonces, se ve claramente que viene un choque fuerte con los Estados Unidos y China. Una presión que ya se está sintiendo fuertemente y muchos piensan que puede terminar hasta en un conflicto armado. Esto a la vez lo que está trayendo es una consecuencia donde las compañías americanas se están estudiando otra vez sus cadenas de suministro, sus supply chains, y tratando de alejarlas de China. Por lo que se dice que lo que está de moda ahorita es lo que se llama el nearshoring, que lo comparas con el offshoring tradicional, donde las compañías buscan a traer sus cadenas de suministro más cerca de los países que están más cerca o que tienen menos riesgo político o geopolítico, como tiene el riesgo con China. Esto representa una gran oportunidad también para nuestro continente, ya que, como dice este estudio del International Data Corporation, América Latina ofrece al mercado norteamericano una combinación única de proximidad geográfica y socios con capacidades desarrolladas para dar servicios de calidad a sus clientes. Entonces, nosotros estamos muy bien posicionadas como continente. Y el estudio dice que México, Guatemala y El Salvador son los 3 países que mejor están posicionados para capitalizar esta tendencia de nearshoring. Entonces, como podemos ver, estas cuatro tendencias implican que vienen tiempos de cambio, vienen tiempos muy tumultuosos para nuestra región. La inflación que está producto del Federal Reserve, la inestabilidad política con la inflación que viene de los alimentos, todo este tema de innovación tecnológica y cambio va a cambiar las industrias, y la tensión China-Estados Unidos implica que va a venir cambios y va a venir muchas tensiones y muchos ups and downs que va a afectar a todo el mundo. Pero como vienen y hay estas amenazas, también tenemos estas oportunidades. Oportunidades como exportar commodities, alimentos, aprovechar todas estas nuevas tecnologías y todo el tema de nearshoring que estaba contando para hacerse parte de la cadena de suministros de los Estados Unidos y de las compañías americanas que se quieren alejar de China. Bueno, esos son como que las 4 grandes tendencias que veo en este mundo post-COVID. Espero que lo hayan disfrutado y disculpen los problemas técnicos que tuvimos. Abierto ahorita para preguntas. Muchas gracias. Aquí está mi correo también. Estoy súper a la orden para cualquier duda o consulta.
Buenísimo, René. Súper interesante. La verdad es que son temas, pues, de verdad sumamente relevantes al tema de los negocios en general. Así que muy interesante escucharte. Vamos tenemos 10 minutos para hacer preguntas, ¿verdad? Para poder compartir un poquito con René. Una pregunta que yo te quería hacer, René, es ¿cuál crees que va a ser ese siguiente salto o esa siguiente movida pues relacionada con ese tema de Decentralized Finance que hablabas? Espérate, ahora no te escucho. Todavía no. Sí te oíamos súper bien antes, pero ahora no te escuchamos.
Aló,
Ahí sí. ¿Tú me ves a mí?
Estaban las palabras del 2020, you're on mute, así que sí.
¿Tú me escuchas bien? No, ahí ya no te escucho. No, ahí no te escucho. Antes sí te escuchaba.
Ahora sí.
Ahí sí. ¿Tú?
Con el mundo DeFi es verdaderamente impresionante, donde hay muchas tendencias que están pasando, que lo bueno es que no depende de ningún gobierno ni ninguna compañía centralizada, sino muchas cosas peer-to-peer, donde se tratan directamente Carolina y René, y por ejemplo, yo puedo pedir prestado ahorita plata con un app en un minuto, utilizando mis Bitcoin de garantía. Y en 2 minutos tengo plata prestada. Entonces, ese tema está muy caliente ahorita. Hay un tema ahorita que se llama los NFTs. No sé si has escuchado.
Sí.
Que son temas de los coleccionables también,
donde...
Tal vez para los que no saben mucho de ese tema, René, si nos puedes contar un poquito, es súper interesante.
Sí, eso se llama non-fungible tokens y es básicamente que en la red yo digo, esta imagen es mía digitalmente y entonces es un poco difícil de comprender, pero por ejemplo una foto la ponen en la web y yo soy el dueño y queda registrado en el blockchain de que esa imagen es mía. Y la gente está pagando unas fortunas ahorita por ese tipo de propiedad digital. Y entonces ahorita salió un cuadro hace varios meses donde lo vendieron por 60 millones de dólares, el cuadro digital. Y ese es el dueño digital de ese cuadro y lo compró por 60 millones de dólares.
Sí, increíble. Yo también escuché de eso, vine escuchando eso desde hace un par de meses y me parece todavía un poco como difícil de entender, ¿verdad? Pero, René, de esas 4 tendencias que tú mencionaste, no sé si es esta que estamos hablando, pero, o de las otras 3, ¿cuál consideras que va a ser de mayor impacto o de mayor importancia para América Latina específicamente?
Sí, a mí la que más me preocupa, sin lugar a dudas, es el tema de la inestabilidad política. Todo este tema del aumento de los alimentos en una población tan pobre que depende tanto, que gasta tanto porcentaje de su salario o de sus ingresos en alimentos, cuando empiezan a subir los precios, si lo pones con el tema que estaba mencionando, de que llevan un año produciendo menos o reprimidos en su casa, y la izquierda, que son unos genios en comunicar y como alborotar el avispero, eso fue lo que me preocupa un poco de lo que viene en el futuro para América Latina. O sea, muy preocupante lo de Chile, muy preocupante lo de Perú, muy preocupante lo de Colombia. Ojalá que Brasil aguante, ojalá que el resto de los países aguanten.
Súper. Aquí hay una pregunta de Javier Alejandro Mendoza en Facebook que nos dice, con el tema de las criptos, ¿cree que sería beneficioso para un startup involucrarse en este momento en ese tipo de inversión o para un autónomo, pues para una persona? ¿Y de qué forma podría una persona ir estudiando ese mercado?
Sí, aquí hay dos cosas. Para un startup que quiera trabajar alrededor del cripto, sin lugar a duda, es un campo muy fértil y que vienen muchísimas cosas ahí que van a cambiar el mundo. Entonces, si el startup se quiere dedicar a ver cómo innovar dentro del blockchain, dentro de todo el mundo DeFi, sin lugar a duda, es una oportunidad espectacular. Muchos lo comparan con el Internet del 1998. Lo que viene ahorita en el futuro, gracias a esta maravillosa tecnología. El tema de inversión es una cosa más delicada, porque como podemos ver, hace 2 días, por ejemplo, el Bitcoin estuvo en 60 y pico mil dólares, hace un mes, ayer llegó a 35 mil dólares. Entonces, tienes que tener un estómago muy fuerte porque sube y baja, sube y baja, sube y baja. Sin embargo, la tendencia es así. Nosotros, por ejemplo, yo tengo una historia personal. En Venezuela minábamos Bitcoin. Y entonces entramos cuando el Bitcoin estaba en 400 dólares. Porque como la moneda venezolana la habían destruido el gobierno, mucha gente se volcó hacia Bitcoin para poder vivir. Entonces, nosotros entramos hace 4 o 5 años en el Bitcoin de 400, entonces, bueno, que pase de 60 a 30 no nos afecta tanto porque entramos muy bajo, pero sí lo recomiendo a largo plazo, pero hay que saber que es muy tumultuoso.
Sí, justo, es como muy fluctuante y algunas personas tal vez un poco más conservadoras dicen, bueno, invierte, pero tal vez no tanto, o sea, en relación a, ¿verdad? Al total. Pero hay una pregunta de Mariano Ramírez que es relacionada, pero yo la voy a como complementar un poquito. Dice, bueno, René, buenas tardes, una pregunta sobre criptomonedas, ¿qué tan confiable es poder invertir? Y más allá de eso, tal vez si tú tienes experiencia, aparte de Bitcoin, con algunas otras, ¿verdad? O más específico en eso.
Sí. ¿Qué tan confiable es? Ultra confiable. O sea, ya la tecnología de Bitcoin está súper establecida. Creo que fue fundada en el 2008, la han tratado de hackear millones de veces, no han podido. Entonces, si pones tu plata en un exchange, si pones tu cripto en un exchange reputable o los guardas tú mismo, los tokens o los keys, como lo llaman, no, es ultra confiable. ¿Sabes? Es una tecnología que está muy comprobada contra hackeos. De ahí el tema está la fluctuación, otra vez. De ahí a que piense que va a ser algo estable, que va a tal y tal, no va a ser estable, es una montaña rusa. Sin embargo, los que creemos en cripto, confiamos más en el Bitcoin que en el banco, en el Federal Reserve de los Estados Unidos, por una sencilla razón, que el Federal Reserve de los Estados Unidos puede imprimir plata, como lo ha hecho en el último año, prende un botón y se crearon trillones y trillones de dólares. Pero el Bitcoin, la belleza es que la cantidad es finita. Sabemos exactamente cuántos Bitcoins van a haber y no va a haber ni un Bitcoin más ni un Bitcoin menos. Se sabe exactamente cuánto es finito. Entonces, por eso dicen que es un valor, un store of value, súper bien, súper fuerte y súper confiable.
Buenísimo.
Con respecto a otras monedas, yo la otra moneda que le tengo muchísima fe es el Ethereum. El Ethereum lo definen como una supercomputadora y el Ethereum es como la nueva fase del Internet. Dicen, porque dicen que son como, está programando todo el tiempo, entonces tú puedes hacer contratos inteligentes donde yo te vendo arte a ti y después yo me quedo con un porcentaje de todas las ventas tuyas. Entonces, toda esta parte del DeFi está construido sobre el Ethereum. Entonces, es espectacular y va a revolucionar el mundo. Sin lugar a duda, lo que viene ahí es increíble. Entonces, eso es otra moneda que a mí me gusta mucho.
Excelente, René. Y por el tiempo me voy a ir con la última pregunta de Lourdes Saldana, que dice, ¿qué debería hacer Guatemala para que su infraestructura de logística sea competitiva en la región latinoamericana?
Repíteme
no
la
está
pregunta.
tan fácil la pregunta. Lourdes dice, ¿qué crees que debería hacer Guatemala para mejorar en su infraestructura de logística y ser más competitivo en la región latinoamericana?
Sí, yo no, para serle sincero, no es un tema que manejo mucho, no conozco muy bien cómo está el tema logístico. Yo creo que súper importante, todo este tema de nearshoring es una oportunidad espectacular para Guatemala. Yo sé que Guatemala hace mucho telas y toda la exportación de banana, la exportación de azúcar, de café, tiene muchísimo potencial. La parte de contract manufacturing, aumentar la parte de telas, todo eso que se muda de Asia hacia Guatemala, representa una oportunidad espectacular. Yo creo que hay que ver cómo se enlaza y se convierte en un socio confiable con las compañías americanas y le auguro un muy buen futuro en el sentido ese, si logran capitalizar bien esa oportunidad que tiene Guatemala.
Buenísimo, René. Pues mira, nosotros felices de seguir conversando, pero ha sido un enorme gusto tenerte con nosotros. Te mandamos un abrazo y esperamos tenerte aquí en Guatemala, ¿verdad? Pronto. Y le doy la palabra a Mónica para presentar a nuestra siguiente invitada. Un abrazo, René.
Muchísimas gracias, Carolina, y gracias a todos por escucharme.
Pues muy buenas tardes de nuevo a todos los que nos acompañan. Bienvenidos al Business Day 2021. Gracias, René. Qué contenido más interesante el que nos compartiste en este momento. Para mí es un gusto. Ahora voy a cambiar a inglés para recibir a nuestra siguiente conferencista. We have today Kory Kogon. Let me speak a little bit of her long list of success stories as a professional. Kory Kogon is Vice President of Global Sales Enablement and Bestselling author of FranklinCovey. She is Vice President of this Global Sales Enablement, and Kory's focus is to help strengthen the capacity of the field teams to help their clients succeed, while driving productivity, revenue, and renewal for FranklinCovey. She is an expert in increasing companies' productivity. She is the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, The 5 Choices, The Path to Extraordinary Productivity, in addition to others like Project Management Essentials for the Unofficial Project Manager, and also Presentations Advantage. For over 25 years, she has business experience and is a business expertise from frontline positions to an executive level team member. Before FranklinCovey, she spent 6 years as the executive vice president of worldwide operations for Alpha Graphics, Inc. Kory has been featured on Inc.com's Productivity Playbook online series, fastcompany.com, Forbes.com, in Investors Business Daily, and numerous other articles and blogs. She has also appeared on NBC's Today and MSNBC's Your Business segment. For us, it's an honor to have you this afternoon sharing with our guests the topic Leading Organizations in COVID Times. Thank you, Kory, for being today with us.
Thank you, Monica. I hope you can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, that was good. Thank you, Monica, so much. And what an honor to be here for such a great purpose and great organizations and institutions. I appreciate everybody that is joining us today and that I'm presenting in English. And so I appreciate that. It's an interesting time to be talking about leading organizations, and we've learned a lot over the years, but certainly the last year or so has made us think differently, do things differently, and just learn so much. And I'll start off by saying, we are in a new reality, and for the last year, many of you and the people that report to you have been working and living a bit like you see, sometimes smiling, sometimes not. And for some around the world, this was not completely new. Myself, I have been working, as we say, remotely for a number of years, even with, a main headquarters, etc. But for others, and in Guatemala too, for many people, brand new, that we have to work like this. And to be honest, somewhat scary. When you think about it, many people weren't even set up to work from home. The children home from school. So it's a complete change. And as leaders, we all were in the same boat. We had to think about our new world, and maybe we didn't have an office and we're working at the kitchen table and all of that. And we had to think about how are we going to work differently. And we had added responsibilities because we needed to lead our people through this. And so leadership skills really got tested. Now, pre-pandemic, if you were a not so good leader or maybe mediocre, you may have been getting by. And because for years we've been talking about what great leadership looks like and what it needs to look like in the new world of work, even before the pandemic. And the new world of work has taken on a whole new look and feel. And so if we were just getting by, so what happened under these new conditions? That's, that we've had to lead through. And that's, unfortunately, when the cracks really show up, when the weaknesses really show up, is when things get stressed. So pre-pandemic, we may have been able to get by as leaders, even with a lot of conversation about how we get better at leaders. But under this kind of pressure and this kind of situation, it's really where weaknesses start to show. I want to share a quote from a recent article, Harvard Business Review, around leading during the coronavirus. And in this article, it was said that rapidly evolving situations expose existing organizational weaknesses. So as I said, if you had leadership weaknesses before, how many of your organizations are really feeling the pain now? And the pain now in output in so many different ways. These kinds of weaknesses or gaps have significant impact on the people and results. Like I said, that we might have been able to absorb before. But now, in this new world of work, so I want to share two statistics that are meaningful around impact and what's happening currently. First of all, what is happening, it has been happening, and now even more so, it becomes very difficult to attract and retain top talent. And as you see here, we know and again, I could be speaking from a US point of view to some degree, but the trends are global, that we know that 1 in 4 employees are planning to change employers this year. And we hear all the time from everywhere now that people are just waiting, and as we can come through recovery, they are possibly mass exiting when the moment is right. It was interesting because a year ago, I had a number of organizations that would say, or the people in the organizations, leadership would say, oh, we don't have to worry about that topic right now because nobody's leaving. And the topics on leadership, it was like, it's not that important anymore right now because we've got bigger things to worry about. But this is the biggest thing to worry about because, and for more reasons, as you'll see, but this is so true. We've seen this over time as well as we cycle through economics over the years, that people, it's sort of, they wait. And then when the moment's right, they go. And generationally, that's been happening over the last few years as well. Bottom line on this, people leave companies because of their bosses. And again, there's some people that can't make moves, but want to. And we'll come to that in a while. Second, I want to say, this definitely takes a bite, this weakness, out of sustainable results. So we know that poor leadership practices cost most organizations to operate with a 5 to 10% productivity drag. So what do we imagine the metrics are? And when are these weaknesses, when these weaknesses are fully exposed in times of crisis? But with all of this, I have some good news for you. One more piece of data here, that engaged employees are more productive, resulting in a 21% increase in profits. So it makes this all very, very tangible in a world where this engagement or leadership stuff has been considered a soft skill, when in fact, meaning there's more important quantitative things, technical skills to work on. This work, this human work, has been considered a soft skill, when in fact, it's one of the toughest things to master, but with a tremendous payoff. So that's sort of the setup around leadership in general, the engagement, and the state of what people are thinking generally. So what do we do? So to start, I want to share from our point of view at FranklinCovey what we know sets great leaders apart. So there's 4 components. First, I think we can all agree that leaders are hired to achieve results. And there are consequences if they don't achieve those results. And I think when you think about leaders and results, I think we all know leaders that I like to say that have left bodies along the way. There's been sacrifice along the way. So we can't just stop there. It's not just about leaders achieving results. To get those results, leaders need to take particular actions. But if you only focus on skills and competencies, because sometimes we do that, it's okay, let's get a list of competencies together, and they'll go through that and they'll be good. It could be a check the box exercise. So we have to go to the next component. We need those behaviors, those competencies, to be driven by how leaders think, their mindsets, how they consciously think about opportunities or challenges or pandemics, and so in all of that, more importantly, how people need to be engaged to, here comes the big line, to volunteer their best efforts under any conditions. These mindsets don't happen without the last one, who they are. Their high character combined with the right mindset that then has leaders behave in ways that totally engage their people to show up ready to play and meet and sometimes even exceed results for the team and the organization. So the key is how leaders need to think about their people as people, not things. You really, I'm telling you, in this day and age, you will not win as a leader if we do not shift our thinking. And what I said to you is because we're in the knowledge worker age, where people are paid now to think, to innovate, to create, to execute, we can't force that out of them. It's not a widget. If you just do that widget, if you don't do 10 widgets, if you only do 9, we'll get somebody else in. We can't force people to give their best. And that's what today's world is. And in catastrophe, and something like COVID, it's even more important that people want to show up and give. So this model, I want to share the impact of our behaviors as leaders. This model helps visualize the impact of leader behaviors. So if you are seeing your people as people, you have to ask yourself, are you inspiring your people up to heartfelt commitment much of the time? Or do we have team members that have been resentful or rebelled or quit, or they're just showing up, resentfully obedient? And how is that affecting results when you're trying to push them to do something, not doing it? And how have you made this work when they're remote? And what behaviors of yours or your leaders may have changed, what has changed that may have driven your people down these levels? Because it has changed when people are no longer in front of you. They're away and invisible, and you can't see. So what has that made you do under tension that maybe drove them down? Here's the punchline. And I said it once, people have choices. And so leaders have to have the mindsets and behaviors that invite their people above the line. And in this day and age, the knowledge worker age, people get to choose to give you their best efforts. You cannot force it out of them. And this, I'm going to say, I'm very empathic to this. It's tough for leaders, right? It's new to some leaders. Some leaders were not led this way themselves. It's easier for me. I always like to say, hey, it's so much easier being bad. It takes a lot of work to be good because it's easier to tell people what to do. And I know better in my career and in all the people that we work with. This is the key to all future results in organizations, whether we work remote, hybrid, or side by side in an office. It doesn't matter anymore. And people need to be invited to volunteer their best efforts because we're trying to get it out of their head and their heart, not out of their hands and their back. So I just want you to take a minute and think about your own organization. And you think about what percentage of your teams are above the line most of the time, and which are not. And think about what can we do about that. So just something for you to think about. So far, what we have is COVID exposing more leadership weaknesses in many cases, that great leaders think differently than others around engagement of people versus things. And our behavior dictates how engaged someone is to bring their best self to work. Last, so I want to point out 2 classic mistakes leaders tend to make that can be barriers to what we have discussed so far, and in some cases have shown up in even a bigger way over the last year. So these are things that can be corrected and give you actions to think about to take with you. First one is that they manage themselves before managing, that they try to manage others before managing themselves. It's hard to manage others if they don't see you as a pretty well put together manager or leader that knows how to make things happen under the toughest conditions. So great leaders, they need to be seen, or leaders need to be seen as those that can make things happen under any conditions, be resilient, instead of throwing up your hands and saying, it's the pandemic's fault, we have no money, we can't, I don't have any budget, I can't help you with that. And it can be easy to slip into this because it has been tough. But we need to be tougher as leaders, and more important, be role models, to be seen as resourceful when possible, right? Or at least give it a try. That's the main thing. Give it a try, make something happen. Here's a great mantra from Dr. Stephen Covey around this. He says, whenever someone waits for someone else to make things happen or provide a solution, I tell them, use your R&I, use your resourcefulness and your initiative. So proactive managers, good role models, will do this to get results. And they realize that their scope of action is much larger than it might appear. And they're not pushy or arrogant, but they are persistent. It's a really big word. I was talking to a number of people about the need for persistence in something like this and as role models. And they're determined to break through the barriers to achieve superb results. And really, there's nothing more important, I don't think, than this in getting us through the pandemic. Because if they don't see you as managing yourself, being proactive, credible, it's going to be very difficult to have them invite themselves to volunteer their best for you or your team. Here's a second mistake they make. They manage people or try to manage people instead of letting their people manage themselves against shared expectations. So if you've been micromanaging or leading a team, I say, to activity, this makes it for a very painful time. How in the world are you checking up on them now? Calling them every few minutes to see if they're working? I've talked to those people who have had those calls 10 minutes apart because somebody's checking up on them. It's not very engaging, I can tell you. Setting clear expectations around the work, setting outcomes connected to the goals of your company and the company vision is key. And then, although it's hard sometimes, if we just get clear, shared expectations, get out of the way. And in this new world of work, it's the best thing we do. And if more leaders thought and behaved like this, it will make any kind of work environment okay, whether it's remote, hybrid, in person. The people, when you do this, the people will feel trusted, and they will not only meet those goals, they will exceed them. It is this feeling of trust, this feeling of autonomy, of letting them feel like they have some control to get to where you need them to go without you telling them every step of the way what they need to do, because then why do they need to think? And you're paying them in this day and age to think. There's one more set of tools that connects to all of this for the motivation of your people that should be standard operating procedure, whether through a crisis, but it's really a mandate ongoing for the new world of work. Empathy and curiosity. And you can't have these tools or use these tools if you don't see your team as people with hearts, minds, and spirits. And in this time, if we're not helping them through being terrified or afraid or concerned, by just listening really well and letting them get it out, you're making a mistake. This is a time to make people feel like you want to learn more about them. And so this combination of showing concern and your curiosity about them is paramount to successful leadership right now for the survival of our organization. Even more important to keep your people as we move into recovery and the necessary innovations. In closing, I want to share some research that was done about what CEOs want in 2021. And I think it's so fascinating because finally we're here. They now know that their organization is only as good as its people. And so they want you to A, empower your remote workforce. I've given you a couple of tips on that. Prioritize employee well-being. Empathy and curiosity will help with that because the end of that sentence is so they bring their best to work. And last, operationalize agility and flexibility. The only way this happens is if your people are engaged close to the top of those engagement levels. So with that, I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for listening. I wish you well today and for you and your family in the future, your organizations, and for the mission of this session that we're holding today. So thank you all very much. Mónica, back to you.
Thank you, Kory. Thank you, Kory. This was a marvelous intervention, as I already knew. You are a marvelous speaker, and your experience and the capacity to mix information, data, and also experiences, it's really, really powerful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Always learning from you. We have several different questions here, and actually we have one that is related with hard skills and soft skills. This continuous discussion between hard skills and soft skills. How would you relate this tension of hard skills and soft skills in the actual times? Because in a way, people have to learn some technical things to move forward in remote mode of working. But on the other hand, you have the soft skills needs. So how could you balance those two things or differentiate what you need to do as an effort for moving forward with those as a leader of a team?
Well, they are both absolutely essential. And all of the research that we see on over the next few years is digitization and artificial intelligence, if you really want to, go out there. But even, people have to learn. In the pandemic, people had to learn how to use Zoom and, just the simplest things. So these are the two areas of skills that show up in all the research that are essential, and they have to be balanced. We need to learn the technical, and there's really nothing else left other than the social emotional skills that are required for human beings to really learn how to collaborate, get their ideas out on the table, and be able to innovate from that. The word soft skills, it needs to go away because they're not really soft anymore. That comes from the industrial age, where it was about factory work and the assembly line, and those were hard skills. Talking was considered soft because you didn't need to talk. Now the hard skills, it's changed. The hard skills really needs to be the human interaction to be able to drive collaboration and innovation. And you have to have technical skills in there as well to keep the products coming.
Oh, great answer. Thank you, Kory. We have a question from Mariana Pensini. She asks this question through Facebook, and she says, as a consultant in leadership, how did leaders catch up during COVID-19? Techniques, tools, topics, which skills did they demand to improve?
Well, I think some of what I talked about, but some of the other skills that were really important again, based on what I already said, if leaders were micromanaging, if they were very authoritative, they were already going to have some problems. So they would need to fix that. And some of the skills that are required is knowing how to do a really, really good one-on-one with your team, knowing how to do a good group, team meeting, but that one-on-one is really important. How to delegate work, because you're not right there with them. Those are two, and really helping your team work through change and helping them, sort of what I said, the skill of empathy is really important, because this is a big change for people under circumstances that they're not walking into offices. I'm grateful I have an office. Not everybody is that lucky to be, to work with. So the skill of empathy has had to be really big for leaders. So if I had to say the top ones, good one-on-ones, delegating and getting out of their way, and being empathic to their situation and helping them move through their own fears and concerns.
Great. We have here a question from Danielle Pacheco, and she says, and connected with the first slide where you shared that 1 of every 4 employers are planning to change the company they're working for in 2021. So she says, what would you recommend we could do to retain our talent?
Well, the way to retain talent is you have to make them feel like there's no better place to work. And remember what I said, that people leave because of their bosses. So it goes back to, do your people feel like they are, as we like to say, or they feel like a valued member on a winning team doing meaningful work in an environment of trust? That's a key piece of learning there, right? I mean, you can think about that, makes it tangible too. I feel like a valued member on a winning team, meaning the team gets stuff done, doing meaningful work. I'm connected to the vision and the mission of the organization in an environment of trust. My boss trusts me, we're good. If leaders think about that, then and people feel, and that's the mindset leaders need to have, that they think, you know what, every person in my organization, for the most part, because everybody has a bad day, but for the most part, are able to say that, no, I feel valued here, I feel trusted. And if you can do that, they will stay.
Well, great answer. We have here another question, Irene Isabel Perez. How to change the mindset of managers and owners of companies who still believe that employees have to work in the office and work many hours to deliver results? Is it common in our countries, or it's something as a trend that you can see?
It's not the first time I've heard that over the years in different countries. I'm so glad there's almost light at the end of the tunnel, so I can come visit countries again instead of doing it by Zoom. It's not the first time I've heard that. And all over the world, there are leaders that operate in old ways where it's like work 1 million hours by activity, and I need to see you. It is, I'll be honest with you, it is very difficult to change them. The best way to change them is, unfortunately, it's usually when they're in pain. So it's one thing that this is something that the pandemic actually did. And we say in English, there are silver linings. We hear that a lot out of the pandemic, that a lot of leaders in the pandemic were forced to change their ways because people were forced at home, and they're learning that it's okay. So another painful thing for leaders is when people leave them and go someplace else, or people are just not giving their best, because you can work 24 hours and I can give you 25% of my potential, or a leader can change their mindset about how that goes and have them work 8 to 10 hours and they'll give 75%. So it's very difficult to change the mindset, but that's a little math may help.
There's another question related with innovation, and we have heard that today everybody's talking about how important it is for organizations to innovate, and it is actually a need, practically, in some circumstances. How would you relate that with the behaviors, the mindset that a leader has to promote in his team or the organization to promote innovation or to enhance innovation?
Thank you for that question. There's a number of ways to look at that. I'll go back to, because all over the world there are innovation like parties, like come up with the best ideas and all of that. And sometimes we innovate by luck. We come up with ideas and maybe the market wants those, maybe they don't. So one of the avenues around that is, what are we innovating to? Do we understand customer needs? And then from there, figure out innovations from that. Having said that, that's part two. Part one, if we even want to get ideas, there's a couple of things here. I'll say it again. If your people don't like working for you or the organization, or they're being micromanaged, and you're like, hey, we need to innovate, they're not going to give you their best thinking. My mother always used to say that to me. She said, Kory, you're not realizing your potential. You're not. And I now I understand what she was saying. But unless somebody feels like a valued member of a winning team doing meaningful work in an environment of trust, you're not going to get good ideas. The other thing as leaders that we need to recognize is communication. That I have found a lot of good ideas don't get out because we haven't helped our team know how to communicate to share an idea. So that's maybe a topic for another day, but it's really important because they're not experienced at it. So it's like, yeah, let me describe, and we don't want to hear it. But if we structured sort of a presentation with them, how do I present my ideas? You'd be surprised how many more good ideas you would find. So again, help them up those levels of engagement so they want to share their ideas, and then help them craft how to present their ideas so that you can see the benefits to your organization fast, which is what you want, and they don't disappear, which is a terrible thing.
Thank you, Kory. And with this, we're closing this segment. We will continue the conversation in the future. Hope to have you back in another event in the future. And thank you so much for dedicating your time, your knowledge, your experience so openly with our crowd today. So thank you so much.
And thank you again for letting me participate in such a worthy cause. So take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Kory. Now we go with Carolina. Carolina va a estar a cargo de la presentación de nuestro siguiente conferencista esta tarde. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Mónica y Kory. It was great hearing you. Very inspirational. Very, very interesting. Thanks so much for your time. And now I have the true, very great honor of introducing our next speaker, Timothy Cho. Dr. Timothy Cho has had a long career spanning academia, successful and not so successful startups, and large corporations. He was the first president of Oracle's cloud computing business, and today serves on the board of directors of Blockbot and Teradata. He started his career at one of the first Silicon Valley startups, Tandem Computers, and today is the chairman of the Alchemist Accelerator, focused on next-generation enterprise software companies. He's recently founded a new venture whose mission is to connect all 1 million healthcare machines in all of the children's hospitals in the world to build a digital infrastructure to transform children's healthcare. He's also been fortunate to begin teaching at Stanford University 39 years ago. In that capacity, Timothy met actually Mónica 3.5 years ago with a group of students from the School of Economic Sciences. He's the father of 3 daughters who all are fluent in Spanish, but neither he or his wife are. He'll explain later. And today he will share with us about is digitalization a necessary disruption? It's a true pleasure having you here, Timothy. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to this chat. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Carolina. I guess the only thing we didn't tell everybody is my youngest daughter is named Carolina. So we like that name. So, hey, thanks for that introduction. And thanks to you and Mónica for inviting me here today. In the next 20 minutes, I want to talk about a couple of things. The title is Digital Disruption Necessary? And I like to answer that by saying, well, only if you want to survive or thrive. And so what I want to do is break this talk into a couple of big pieces. One, I want to give you some examples in the United States, 4 different companies, talk a little bit about what is the power of digital disruption and why it might matter. Second, I want to talk about, well, what is digital disruption? I'm going to give you a real brief introduction to some 5 powerful software technologies. And then I want to talk about not how all of this might matter to a country like the United States, but how does it matter to countries which may have similar challenges to Guatemala? So I'm going to talk about Kenya, I'm going to talk about India, I'm going to talk about Vietnam. And at the end, I want to leave you all who are listening to this with 5 big challenges, and challenges that I think could lead to a better Guatemala, to I'll use the phrase, a digital Guatemala. And then at the end, I'll explain why it is my kids are fluent in Spanish, but my wife and I aren't. So let me start with digital disruption. I don't think it's any big secret. This has been going on for quite some time, but I want to put some numbers around this. Mónica's from the School of Economics, so I'm going to put some economic numbers around this. And I'm going to talk about four pairs of companies. So let's start by talking about Verizon and Zoom. So Verizon's one of the largest telecommunication companies in the United States. Zoom, as we've heard many times, has been a very fast-growing company, particularly in the era of COVID. What you probably don't know or not thought about is Verizon has 10 times the revenue of Zoom, 10 times the revenue of Zoom, but it's only 2.5 times more valuable measured by its market cap. So 10 times the revenue, but only 2.5 times more valuable, which means if Zoom were to grow 2.5 times more, well, they'd be worth as much as one of the largest telecommunications companies in the world. So we'll leave telecommunications behind, and let's talk about McDonald's and DoorDash. DoorDash, some of you may never have heard of, but is a company which just recently went public delivering food, and obviously delivering a lot of fast food or food from, smaller restaurants. McDonald's, you all know who that is, right? The world's largest restaurant. What you probably don't know is while McDonald's has 10 times the revenue of DoorDash, it's only 3 times more valuable. So even though it's 10 times the size, it's only 3 times the value. Let's go to financial services. Wells Fargo, again, a top 5 bank in the United States. As compared to Stripe. You may not have heard of Stripe, but Stripe is a payment processing company, a company founded actually less than 10 years ago. Today, Wells has 150 times the revenue of Stripe, but it's only worth 4 times as much. And then the example you probably are all thinking in your head is Walmart and Amazon. Walmart, one of the world's largest retailers, is 2 times the revenue of Amazon at this point in time, but only 1/5 as valuable. So Amazon's long gone past them from a market valuation point of view. Now, I know in all these cases, they're not direct comparisons. Amazon does much more than just retail. DoorDash doesn't sell hamburgers, or they don't make hamburgers. But I think I want to make the point that these new digital companies that were born in the digital world, are the ones that have exceedingly more valuable than the ones in the traditional world. So what are they built on? These digital companies are not built on, wood and lumber and steel and bricks. They are built on top of software. They're fundamentally built on 5 core technologies that I just want to say for you to hear the words. Maybe you can go do some research and learning. So the 5 big things I'll say are, number one, cloud computing. Cloud computing sits at the core of everything that's happened. It started maybe 20 years ago by having applications being delivered as cloud services. Amazon entered about 15 years ago, providing compute and storage, and fundamentally has shifted how people build software in the modern era. Cloud computing, number one. Number two, 5G. 5G is just the next step in what has really revolutionized everything, which is communications technology. The fact that we're talking today is testimony to how much communications technology has changed things. 5G is greater density, higher speeds, lower latency, which will also enable new classes of applications, including those that touch things. There are about 600 billion things in the world today. That's literally 100 times the population of the world. And as we connect these things, whether that's agricultural equipment, ultrasounds, cars, it's going to change what it means to make these things, make these machines, as well as what it means to use them. Fourth, edge computing. The edge is just a manifestation of what we have seen over and over again in tech, meaning that as computers get cheaper and cheaper, we move them further and further away from the center. And so edge computing, you already, by the fact that you're probably holding a cell phone in your hand or holding an edge computer, you're going to start to see more and more high performance computing at a low cost, right, further and further out in the network. And finally, all of this, the ability to connect things, the ability to compute, is leading to advances in artificial intelligence. The area I would tell you to go spend time is learn about neural networks. Neural networks are the fundamental technology which sitting behind why Google Translate works so well, why facial recognition works so well. And it is born of the idea that if I can accumulate more data with more compute, I can get increasing levels of accuracy, whether that means accuracy in translating English into Spanish or Spanish into English, or accuracy in terms of recognizing pneumonia. So these are all cool technologies. They sit at the core of all the advancements, the digital disruptors that we've seen to date in the United States. But I think when you come to Guatemala, and I did a little bit of, I try to be a good student, did a little bit of research about Guatemala, you realize, well, Guatemala, like 40% of the population doesn't have a bank account. It has one of the lowest literacy rates in Central America. It has half the doctor to citizen ratio that WHO recommends. So maybe conversations about what's going on in America, yeah, okay, fine. It's good to tell you these stories. But maybe let's talk about other countries which don't enjoy all the things we have in the US. So I'm going to start by talking about Kenya. Kenya, I don't know if you guys know this, but actually, now it's probably been 5-8 years ago, they moved to a total digital currency. Go read on M-Pesa. M-Pesa is a digital currency born of the fact that they work with the cell phone companies, et cetera. Today, 50% of Kenya's GDP is processed through M-Pesa. Not hard cash, not hard currency, digital currency. And by the way, 93% of Kenyans have bank accounts, have mobile payment systems. But it's not just limited to let's call it a small country in Africa. India, I would counsel you also to be a student on this. Actually, I experienced this. In 2016, Modi basically decided, hey, we're not going to have this much hard currency around. We're going digital. It was very disruptive, by the way, at the time, including when I was there. It was like, I didn't know how you got a taxi cab if you didn't have hard currency. But their move to a digital currency has been meteoric. Just to give you a stat, there's a government payment processor who processed 100,000 transactions before this currency shift. 1 year later, 76 million transactions processed per month. But I don't want to make this just about banking or about currency. I'm going to talk a little bit about Vietnam. Tell you a quick story. I went to Vietnam actually to do a kickoff for a book that I wrote, which got translated into Vietnamese. I was invited on the day after I arrived to have lunch with the mayor of Hanoi, who at that point in time, I actually didn't realize how important he was. We had this nice lunch. At the end of it, I told him, I said, hey, you know, if I was you, these are the 3 things I would do in Vietnam. And so, you know, we had the nice lunch, shook hands, left. On the way out, my host said, hey, you know, they'd like to do something nice for you. I said, well, what does that mean? They said, well, we need your passport. I said, am I getting it back? He said, well, yeah, trust us. I said, okay. So the next day, I come down from my hotel room, meet this guy in the lobby. By this time, I understand he is the chief of staff to the mayor. The mayor is one of 17 members of the Central Committee. And so he hands me back my passport. And in it, I am now a citizen of the country of Vietnam for the next 5 years. So you might ask, well, what did you say to him, right? So let me walk through this just so you can start to think about the fact that the big thing I said to him to begin with was I said, hey, you guys are sitting here debating whether or not you want to be a cheaper programming site than India. And I said, why are you going to build someone else's future when you could build your own? And I said, well, let me give you some examples. Said, let me start with the fact that you are one of the largest exporters of shrimp in the world. It is fairly obvious that the next step in shrimp manufacturing is branded shrimp. How would you brand shrimp? Well, you'd brand it by quality control. How would you do that? Well, you'd measure the quality of the water. You'd be instrumenting the machines that clean the shrimp, right? A totally digital business, which would allow you to create higher quality shrimp that you could sell at a higher price. Number 2, turns out Vietnam's one of the largest textile manufacturers in the world. Actually, the Chinese have moved textile manufacturing out of China into Vietnam because it's lower labor rate. And I told him, I said, well, I bet you anything that if I walk in to those textile manufacturing sites, that those machines there making textiles were not manufactured in Vietnam. And I said, look, at this point in time, you guys know way more about textiles than anybody else in the world. Why would you not build a next generation textile manufacturing machine, which was totally digital, connected, right? That could allow you to build custom fabrics of any kind. And by the way, not only would that improve the productivity of your own textile industry, but you could export that worldwide. And the last point I made to him is I said, let's talk a little about healthcare. Said, you know, healthcare sits at the core of any country. And at the end of the day, can you replicate a, quote, first world healthcare system? Some of us would debate whether you want to do that, but can you build enough hospitals? Can you build enough medical schools to do it the old-fashioned way? And I said, well, why would you do it the old-fashioned way, right? If you look at what it looks like today, we build buildings to put machines in, like gene sequencers and ultrasounds and all that. And then we put our smart humans in the building who are only accessible if you come to the building. And I said, you know, we figured this out in my business, technology, a long time ago. You could put the computers away from the humans. You could create networks. And I said, and oh, by the way, you could put those gene sequencers in central Vietnam, and you actually have the political muscle to gene sequence every human being in Vietnam. So I'm going to end by saying to you guys, I'm going to give you 5 big challenges that I want you to think about in Guatemala. I'm going to start by saying, number 1, build your own future. I mean, it's great to learn things about what we're doing in the States and whatnot, but It's not the same. And I'll just give you a simple example of this. If you look at what has happened in China, on the one hand, yes, they kind of closed things down and said, I don't want you American companies here for a whole variety of reasons. But the other part is, if you look at China, the way it looks, it's these massive populations sitting in highly dense city centers. So, which never, by the way, built landlines. It was totally mobile from day one. So the technologies that evolved there in how mobile payments works, how you get food, how you order everything has evolved actually quite differently than what happened in the US because of the way they live and because their computer has always been the cell phone. It's never been some laptop or something else. So number one, build your own future. You have your own challenges, build your own future. Number two, build it with software. I try to help people understand that software is an amazing thing. Its cost to create is zero. It is literally your imagination. And so its cost to create is zero. Its cost to deploy, meaning to activate it, is nearly zero. At this stage in cloud computing, I can get a computer to run for an hour in a managed environment for 2.5 cents. So its cost to deliver is near zero. So building a future based on software is building a future based on innovation, your brain, and in essence, no cost structure versus, oh, I'm going to use bricks and steel, et cetera, to go build my future. The third thing I'm going to say is, and I did give you a lot of examples out of digital banking, but if you really start to think about it, at the end of the day, nothing happens without flow of money, flow of cash. There can be no commerce. And the technologies all exist today to do this. I already told you about a little African country called Kenya, which pulled it off many years ago. I would really tell you, start thinking about how you move to digital banking, digital currencies, et cetera, to improve access to capital, to improve flow of capital, et cetera. So that's a third thing. The fourth is education. I commented on literacy rates. I'm talking at a university event. Education, we all know, is like core and key to any next step in any society, in any country. And I would just say, start thinking about it differently. Why do we do education as we put a bunch of smart people in a building and we make it accessible to only a few people? And by the way, that's true in the United States. That's how we think about it. We put our smart people, you know, our lecturers like Mónica, et cetera, in a building, and we say, well, only, 1,000 of you can come here and listen to her. Why do we do that? With the technologies we have, with the abilities that we have, why do we not shift how we educate everybody from the youngest to the oldest and make it possible to be able to build your own future? And the last, and it's probably because I've been spending, as you heard, time in a very ambitious project to connect all million healthcare machines and all the children's hospitals in the world and build a digital infrastructure that can completely transform children's healthcare. I'd say get on the path to thinking about healthcare in a digital era. Again, why do we put smart people in a building accessible to a few people as the fundamental idea of how we deliver healthcare? If we start to rethink this, right, our populations, by the way, including the United States, needs to rethink this, because at the end of the day, if your population is not healthy, is not educated, I mean, what future is there? And so hopefully I've left you with a couple of challenges, touched on a few things that I want you to go get smarter about: cloud computing, the Internet of Things, AI, 5G, and edge computing, and encourage you to, I said, build your own future. And I hope that the things that the university, Mónica, et cetera, I love the motto, she told us about it the other day, allows more and more and more people to take advantage of an education that could change their lives. So thank you all.
Hi, Timothy. Back with you again. Thank you so much. What an amazing conference. Very clear ideas. So really appreciate it. You forgot to tell us about the fluency of English.
Yeah, no, thank you. So that's the first question. So why are my kids fluent in Spanish? So it turns out in Palo Alto, California, home of Stanford University, now my oldest is 30. So when she went to kindergarten, so she was 5 years old. So this is 25 years ago. The city decided to start a Spanish immersion program. And that program was that kids came to kindergarten and the only thing they got spoken to was Spanish. And so my kids from basically kindergarten to third grade, when they went to school, it was only in Spanish. By the fourth grade, they started mixing in English, et cetera. So one thing was for sure, their parents couldn't help them with their homework at all.
But that's amazing, Timothy, because actually what I've heard from a few friends from the States is that they get a few courses, but they're a year long or, so those years and so young, definitely.
Well, that's why many people say they have no accent. They speak perfect Spanish. Well, that's because they were taught as, in essence, kids. So nobody taught them in a language class. They just got talked to, like how people learn language.
Well, we have a few questions, Timothy. First, the question I had is obviously with one of the challenges of software, of you're saying build it with software, right? Actually, we recognize the importance of, for example, computer science programs, right, nationally. And is there any specific program or investment or companies or any initiative that you've seen in other countries similar to Guatemala that you think could obviously help move forward the amount of people that study these type of careers that would help us eventually to build more software locally?
Yeah. So the quick answer is, I think everybody, including the U.S., is struggling with this question. I think the problem is, and I get to say this because I have taught computer science at one of the most reputable computer science departments in the country or the world, is I think replicating computer science curriculum, which is what everybody wants to do, is the wrong answer. What we really need, let me give you the analogy that I try to explain this with. So I'm going to talk about plumbers and hydraulic engineers. So there are people who are called hydraulic engineers. They go to school, they learn about metals and materials and how do you build better P-traps and fluid dynamics and all that stuff. And then there's plumbers who have no idea. They just know that if you connect A to B and you run it this long, it's going to work in your house, right? Mm-hmm. And our curriculum in computer science is designed to teach the hydraulic engineer how to build better P-traps, et cetera. We have not figured out how we teach better plumbers. Mm-hmm. And it's really, to me, that's the question we ought to be asking ourselves. How do we create better plumbers? And by the way, the only way that's happened in the trades is the apprenticing programs. That's how it's happened, right? I go work with a master plumber for 5 years, and he or she says, you're doing it wrong, and you go do it right, you do it right, which is why a lot of people will say, including Stanford kids, the day after they graduate and they go to work somewhere, they'll say, well, nothing I learned at school matters here. It's OTJ is the only way we've been doing it so far, which is not, in my opinion, the right answer to this question. And I think, here in the community colleges or whatever, starting to rethink how we do this, I think that's what we need to do. And none of us across the planet have done this yet. But it could happen in Guatemala first, by the way.
Very interesting, Timothy. Thanks so much. Yeah. I have a question from Mariana. She says, how did Kenya and India generate such high penetration rates in mobile payment through digital currency? Which learnings can be reapplied to Guatemala and Latin America?
I believe what happened in Kenya was Kenya did it all. Number one was on cell phones. It was all cell phone stuff. There was nothing else. So it was all simple sign up. The cell phone companies were backing it. There was no bank trying to stand in the way of it, which has happened in a lot of places. So I think a combination, which is probably appropriate even in Guatemala. Kenya, obviously, I mean, the government obviously had a lot to do with it, because who runs the cell phone company other than the government? It's not private sector, right? So I think it's because it was cell phone first, cell phone only, number one. And number two, they made a government decision, which is, by the way, what happened in India. India was, okay, we're getting rid of a certain number of current. That's what they did. They took in essence, I don't remember how many rupees it was, but the $100 bill started vanishing. So there was no hard currency. So now it's like, well, okay, I if I'm going to pay you, I can only pay you digitally.
I better do that digitally.
Yeah, the government made that move. Now, a lot of people have reasons why he did it, et cetera, but it was the government that took the move, and the government did it by getting rid of hard currency, basically.
Okay. And I have another question from Andres Vargas. He says, with a very traditional banking system in Guatemala, where or with who could I go to research more about digital banking?
I think, it's everything from understanding how payment companies like Stripe, go be a student of Stripe. What is Stripe doing? How is Stripe doing it? Robinhood's an interesting one. It's been in the news all around stock trading, et cetera, which is not quite banking, but one of the aspects of banking. So I think one is just to be a student of, there's a lot of innovation in what we call fintech here, financial technology. Stripe is a great example of this. Venmo is a great example. There are a lot of examples of it. So I say, number one, just go be a student of the startups that have done well, Stripe being a great example of this. And then number two, I would become a student of what has happened in Kenya and India from a country point of view, because these are big steps that are going on there, which I have to say, if it's going to happen in Guatemala, it's also the government has to become involved in wanting to go do something like this. It's not going to be a private sector play.
Yeah, although obviously private companies play a huge role in that process too.
Yeah, but I think it has to happen because the government's going to go, let's go this way. If you're going to make this big a shift. I mean, the United States, we don't process, 50% of the US GDP does not move through mobile, through a mobile currency. Not at all. Right? We're like at 10%, right? Or something. So if you're going to go this far, it's going to be a lot of things going to have to happen. Now, like I said, I don't think the US is a particularly good example for a lot of things because, we've come from a very different place and we have different economic models at work here. So that's why I said I was encouraging, being students of other countries who, are similar, let's say, size and sophistication levels is a good thing to go do.
Timothy, another question we had is, how do you best suggest to promote access to these technologies in countries like ours?
Well, I think, just the internet is a great teacher as well. I mean, if you're interested in cloud computing or 5G or, how to build an Android application, I mean, there is so much content sitting out there. Now, I know the challenge is, which one's better and which one's worse, but there's a lot of stuff out there. I think if there's the desire to learn, the content is there. And that's what I would say. Go start learning. I even say this to Stanford kids. I mean, get an account at Amazon, build an application. It's not that hard to do. I mean, and start learning by doing. Just to make a point, that is the beauty of software. That is generally how it happens. Yeah, you can go to class for a little while, but just go do it. And you'll screw up and it won't work. And you'll ask somebody how to help me. And in time you'll figure it out.
Try again.
Try
Yeah,
again.
definitely.
It may look like rocket science, but it isn't rocket science.
It's a lot of time invested in, learning about it and trying it out. So I had another, I think one of the last questions, Timothy, is from Irene Perez. She's asking, she says, thank you for sharing your great ideas. Transforming our healthcare and education are without a doubt priorities for our country. Could you share advice or ideas in how the private sector can transform healthcare and education and take advantage of this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say it can't happen through private enterprise. I mean, I'll just give you a simple example of something that's going on right now is the whole, transformation in effect of what education looks like at the the kindergarten, primary school level with new internet provided services, which are being used a lot because we're in this COVID era. So I could say, hey, if you want to go create the new world of digital education, I mean, go be a student of Coursera. There's another example in the US, right? Partner with the university and say, hey, how could we build a digital version of this? I think everybody, one of the advantages I think COVID has brought everybody, if there's an advantage, is we've all learned that this network thing kind of works. Telemedicine in the United States has actually taken an enormous leap because of COVID, because, you can't go.
Definitely.
So I think there's actually a better understanding that, yes, we can, work remotely. We could get educated on a network. We can get healthcare on a network. I think there's a higher degree of acceptance because we've kind of seen it work. And so I think if you're a new venture, if you're a private enterprise, leap, go, push, take advantage of this movement and leap ahead, whichever way you think the world would work best in Guatemala, which I keep going back to. I think that's the essential thing. What's going to work in Guatemala? It's not exactly what's going to work in the US, by the way, just to keep
Definitely.
saying. Yeah.
Well, Timothy, it was a pleasure having you here. Really enjoyed hearing you. And it's been a pleasure also getting to know you. And we hope to have more opportunities in the future to connect.
Well, I really appreciate being invited. And this is this Business Day, such a worthwhile cause. I applaud you guys for doing this and taking your own time and effort to go do this to help. I mean, we all know the difference an individual can make, a single individual can make. And so I think what you guys are doing, it's magic. So
thanks so much. That's so inspiring. Thanks so much. Have a great night and we'll be in touch.
Okay. Have a good evening.
Bye, Timothy.
Adiós.
Adiós. Ahora le dejo la palabra a Mónica para que introduzca a nuestra último conferencista.
Muy buenas tardes a todos, ya casi noches. Gracias por acompañarnos en este Business Day 2021. Y el día de hoy cerramos este Business Day con la presentación de nuestro próximo conferencista, el cual haré la presentación en inglés. Thank you, Timothy, for a great intervention. And as you mentioned, there's nothing that can be more powerful than individual action. And right now, I'm going to introduce an individual that his actions have moved forward great brands. So Guy Kawasaki, he is an expert in innovation, entrepreneurship, social media, podcasting, and marketing. He's an evangelist, which comes from the Greek word that means bringing the good news. So that is what he does, whether the good news of Macintosh or the good news of Canva. He's the chief evangelist of Canva, an online graphic design service. This program empowers people to create great graphics without buying or learning high-end applications. He is a creator of the Remarkable People podcast, where he has interviewed famous people such as Jane Goodall, Stephen Woolram, Bob Cialdini, Ariana Huffington, and Christy Yamaguchi. We are very, very honored to present Guy Kawasaki in the topic Why Wait? Start your own business now and boost your business with digital marketing tools. Guy, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And I would like to say that you have a very deep connection with Guatemala.
Yeah, I do.
I would let you tell it to all the audience. Thank you so much for being with us. It's an honor.
All right. So, yeah. Well, first of all, I got here early, which is a rarity to be early. And I watched most of Timothy's lecture, and it was really great. I learned a lot. I'm so glad. I'm gonna have to pay you. Did you charge to come to this conference? I owe you for my attendance here. It was a great talk. So yeah, my name is Guy Kawasaki. I am Chief Evangelist of Canva, and I am the creator of the Remarkable People podcast. And I am going to talk to you today about innovation. And innovation that I learned in Silicon Valley, innovation that I learned in Sydney, Australia, working with companies such as Apple and Canva and Google. And oh my goodness, there's almost too many to mention. So that's the lesson that I would like to pass on to you. Okay. And I am going to use slides. So I am going to share my screen, God willing, because you just never know. Let's see here. Now, if the internet gods are with me, which is always a little scary, I will. Okay, so do you see that? We good? So I am going to talk to you today about the art of innovation. As I said, I'm Chief Evangelist of Canva and creator of the Remarkable People podcast. So let's talk about the art of innovation. And boy, is everything working all right? I just want to make sure before I start. I'm good. Everything's good.
Yeah, we see your screen. It says design anything, and it has like little boxes. So if that's what you are, trying to show us,
wow. Well, okay. So you appear to be about one screen behind me. You should be seeing. You see this right here. This the art of innovation. You should be seeing that, and it should be full screen. So let me do that again.
Okay, great. And remember, Guy, that anytime you can see the chat, so you can, interact there just in case as a second resource.
So
we wait here until you have it.
Do you see the art of innovation slide?
No.
What?
We still see the design anything slide. It is like a screen that says
that is bizarre.
Canvas, yeah.
Yeah, see, this is why I'm not a professor at Stanford, and Timothy is.
But don't worry. We're here waiting for a great, exposition. So yeah, you have to choose the window that you want to share. So whenever you choose share, instead of choosing the whole screen, you choose exactly the window you want to share.
Okay. And I have done this. Oh my God, I do this twice a week, every week.
Don't worry. We love to see you a little nervous.
Okay. So
So we're, excited to hear about innovation, especially from someone with your experience.
Okay, now do you
Now we
see?
have it. So we have it, but we are seeing the art of innovation, and on the left side we
You
see,
still see yes.
little slides. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to press this. Present.
The present
Cross your
one.
fingers.
Cross the fingers. Da-da-da-da. Great, it worked. Okay. So now I leave you alone.
Okay, so for the third time, I'm telling you, I'm talking about the art of innovation. And you alluded to my connection with Guatemala. So my actual first slide, this is a slide a picture that was taken about 19 and a half years ago. So I have 2 adopted children from Guatemala. This is my daughter, Noemi. So this is her first flight from Guatemala to Los Angeles. And I have, we have adopted her and her brother. So we have 2 Guatemalan children. And people say that we even look alike. So that's I have a very intense connection with Guatemala. So that's I dug this picture out to show you. So that's my daughter from Guatemala. So let's talk about the art of innovation. And I learned this working for Apple, as well as Google and Canva. And the thing that I learned in Silicon Valley and in tech, and I think Timothy would absolutely agree with this and absolutely second this emotion, is great change happens because you jump to the next curve, not because you stay on the same curve. It's not because you do the same old brick and mortar banking. It's not because you do the same old copper wire telephony. It's because you get to the next curve. And I'll use a very old example. So there used to be an ice harvesting industry in America, and this is the late 1800s. People would go out into these frozen lakes and ponds with these horses and sleighs and saws, and they would cut blocks of ice. That was ice 1.0. Ice 2.0 was now you had an ice factory. You could freeze water centrally. This is much better. You could have an ice factory in Guatemala. You could not have ice harvesting in Guatemala. And then ice 3.0 was the refrigerator curve. Now, the ice factory's advantage was that it didn't have to be a cold place and it didn't have to be a cold time of year. The refrigerator's advantage is that it could be anywhere. It could be in your house. You didn't have to deal with an ice factory. And so ice 1.0, ice 2.0, ice 3.0. But the very interesting thing is that, believe it or not, no ice harvester became an ice factory and no ice factory became a refrigerator company. And that is a very important concept in innovation, that it is about getting to the next curve. Second thing I learned about innovation is you have to work backwards. And working backwards means that instead of looking at what you're currently doing, harvesting ice, freezing water centrally, you have to go to the customer and work backwards from the customer. What does the customer want, as opposed to what are you currently doing and what are you capable of doing? And so this is crucially important to understand, when to get to the next curve, what the next curve should be. It's not based on what you can do. It's based on what people need. And I will show you a negative example. So this is a picture of an engineer at Kodak. This picture was taken in 1975. And believe it or not, that thing on the table there, that is the first digital camera ever made. Now, stop here and think about this. So Kodak made the first digital camera. Now, if Kodak were working backwards, they would have said, well, what our customers want is not so much chemicals on film or chemicals on paper. What our customers are really getting from us is the preservation of memories. That's what people want to do. They want to preserve birthday parties. They want to preserve sporting events and weddings. That's what they want to do. So working backwards, they want to preserve history. They want to preserve events. They want to preserve memories. Let's work backwards and see how we can do that best for them. But Kodak had an attitude of working forward. We are in the chemical business. We make chemicals. We put chemicals on paper. We put chemicals on film. Kodak should have realized it's in the preservation of memories business, not in the chemicals business. The third thing is to ask a very simple question. I think great innovation occurs because of simple questions, not because of diabolical, world-changing, denting the universe kind of big plans. It's very simple questions. So let's say that we go back in history to just as cell phones were coming out. And you look at the cell phone and it's getting smaller and smaller and cheaper. And pretty soon there's a cell phone with a camera. Obviously, that cell phone is on a data network. And you think, oh, well, so there are going to be lots of people with phones that have a camera. So therefore what? What business could we start? And I think you might have come to the conclusion that you should start something like Instagram, where you can share photos. So you take your vision and your passion and your ability to predict the future and see the future, and you ask yourself, well, in that future, therefore what? I mean, in the pandemic, when you see that people cannot be in physical classrooms, therefore what? What kind of business, what kind of service can we offer based on the fact is that, for a long time, people are not going to physical buildings. You might have come up with the idea of Zoom. So the question to ask is, knowing what you know, seeing what you're seeing, predicting what you're predicting, ask the question, therefore what? The fourth thing is to get high and to the right. And I'm not talking about drugs or politics. I'm talking about positioning and branding and your mental space. And so this is a very simple chart. Differentiation. How different are you? How different is your product or service on the vertical? Horizontal. How important is it? How valuable is it? So if you're far off to the right, there you have lots of value, but you're not different. You always have to compete on money. You have to compete on price. If you're in the upper left corner, that's where you're very unique, very different, but you have no value. There, you're just stupid. In the bottom left corner, that's the worst corner of all, because you have something that's not valuable, and there's a lot of companies doing the same thing that's not valuable. So, for example, in America, during the dot-com days, there were several ways to buy dog food online, but it wasn't really useful because you could discount the dog food because you didn't have a dog food retailer, but then you had to add back shipping and handling, and somebody had to be at home when the dog food came to your house. So it was not valuable. And then stupid people like me in Silicon Valley, we funded 4 ways to buy dog food online. So the corner you want to be in is the upper right-hand corner. That right-hand corner is where you have something that is unique and valuable. And I think when the iPod first came out, it personified this corner. It was the only tool that a mere mortal could use because of its user interface. It had a wide selection of music. It was music that you could legally and easily install on your device, and inexpensively, 99 cents per song. There was nothing in the world like that. It was easy to use, wide selection, cheap and legal. And that's why iPod succeeded. So I'm asking you, as you think of the device, the service, the product, the company that you're trying to create, give yourself this test. Is it unique and valuable? The fifth thing is, don't worry, be crappy. That is, at the start of a great revolution, a great innovation, your first version is not going to be perfect. You are going to look back and say, oh my God, I'm embarrassed by what we shipped. And here is an example. This is a Macintosh 128K with Steve Jobs. Okay, so this computer was $2,500. It had 128K of RAM, had a 400K floppy drive. Thanks to my efforts, there was no software. The monitor was only black and white. It was only 9 inches. Now, I have to say that there's a part of me that's embarrassed that, oh my God, what were we thinking? Well, we shipped such an underpowered little, machine. But at the time, it was the next curve of personal computing. And so what I learned is that, when you get to the next curve, ship it. You cannot wait for perfection. And if we had waited for chips and monitors and software and storage, if we had waited for the perfect world, we would have never shipped and life would have passed us by. So don't worry, be crappy. Now, I am not saying ship crap. I am saying if you are on the next curve, if you've created the next curve, get it out there. The sixth thing is to let 100 flowers blossom. And by this, I mean, you take your positioning and your branding, what is your product, your service going to do? Who's going to use it? And you get it out there. And then you might have a very, very surprising result, which is people that you thought were going to buy it don't buy it, and people you never considered as a potential customer do buy it, and they may even use it in ways you did not intend. So with Macintosh, we thought it was a spreadsheet, database, and word processing machine. Guess what? It was rejected in all three markets. And the market that it succeeded in is a market we did not anticipate. It was desktop publishing. This is a screenshot from an early copy of PageMaker. So PageMaker doesn't take a rocket science to figure out what PageMaker does. It makes pages. And so this was the killer app of Macintosh. No PageMaker, Apple would have died. And so this is an example of a flower that bloomed. Apple didn't plant this flower. Aldous planted this flower. And without this flower, Apple would have died. Let 100 flowers blossom. Don't be proud when people embrace your product or service and use it in ways you did not anticipate. The seventh thing is that great innovators change their mind. They are not afraid of changing your mind. Changing your mind is a sign of intelligence and courage. This is an example. When Steve Jobs announced the iPhone on June 11, 2007, he said, our innovative approach using Web 2.0 based standards lets developers create amazing new applications while keeping the iPhone secure and reliable. Let me translate what he's saying. He's saying the iPhone is a closed system. You cannot add functionality other than Safari plugins. A year later, Apple executives to showcase Mac OS X Leopard and OS X iPhone development platforms. A year later, Apple opens up the iPhone. It's complete reversal of direction. If Apple had not reversed its initial closed architecture, iPhone would have not succeeded, and maybe Apple would not be here today. So contrary to what you might think, changing your mind is a sign of intelligence, and it is a sign of courage. Number eight is innovators remove speed bumps. Speed bumps that just are a barrier to adoption. And often when you are in a company, you don't even feel, you don't even see, you don't even experience the speed bumps that you are putting up in front of your customers. One of which is an example that most people are familiar with, which is this kind of stuff. This is when you want to sign up for an account, when you want to pay, when you want to check out, when you want to do something, register. You have to go through CAPTCHA, or you have to select all the images with chimneys. And every time I encounter one of these or CAPTCHA, I swear, it takes me at least 4 or 5 tries to get past this. And this is just ludicrous. I mean, it's almost as if you're saying, well, we really don't want too many customers. We're going to try to put enough speed bumps in front of them so that not all of them can get through. This is utterly ridiculous. Remove the speed bumps. Number nine, there were political revolutionaries in America, the Black Panther movement, that had a saying, burn, baby, burn. But what I think that business innovators do is churn, baby, churn, which is you have to take version 1 of your refrigerator, of your laser printer, of your computer, of your website, and you have to churn it. 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 2.0. And I'm going to show you next. This is the product map of Apple, starting from the Apple II till very recently. And so it's not important that you look at all the little details on this, except to get the appreciation that, oh my God, there are a lot of different models. There are a lot of attempts. Shall I say that not every computer on this was definitely a success. There was a lot of thrashing to get from Mac 128K to the new colored flat iMacs and M1 MacBooks of today. Churn, baby, churn. Number 10 is to ignore the naysayers. When you are an innovator, you are going to encounter naysayers. They're going to tell you it can't be done, it shouldn't be done, it isn't necessary. What's wrong with copper? What's wrong with harvesting ice? What's wrong with going to the bank? What's wrong with ATMs where you have to stick in a card? Why do we need a mobile-based system? And you need to learn to ignore these people. And the way you learn to ignore these people is by seeing that some people who were very successful were so wrong. So don't listen to naysayers. Here's an example. I think there's a world market for maybe 5 computers. Thomas Watson, chairman of IBM, 5 computers. I have 5 Macintoshes in my house. This telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. The device is inherently of no value to us. Western Union in 1876 wrote off telephony. How do you like that? Probably very few people currently use Western Union. We're all on the phone that Western Union said had too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. And this is a really great example. There's no reason why anyone would want a computer in their home. Ken Olsen. Ken Olsen was the founder of DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation. Fantastic company, great innovator, great entrepreneur. But you know what? He was so successful making mini computers, he could not embrace personal computers. It would be as if you have a really successful ice factory, would you start making refrigerators? I hope you would. But probably you wouldn't. You would say, why would anybody want a refrigerator? They just have to get ice from the ice factory, my ice factory. The point here is that, some very successful people have predicted that things would fail, and they were wrong. And it's because they're conflicted. They have blinders on. It's also because, frankly, they just are losing track of how the market is moving. So when people tell you it can't be done, it shouldn't be done, it isn't necessary, what's wrong with how we do things now? I'm not telling you that whenever you encounter that negativity, it means that you'll succeed. It's not that simple. But when you encounter that negativity, and if you listen to them and never tried, if Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak had met Ken Olsen, and Ken Olsen told them there's no reason to have a computer in their home, and they said, okay, Mr. Olsen said that, so let's go learn Fortran and COBOL and go work for DEC, there would be no Apple. And that would be a serious problem for the world right now. Okay, so that is the art of innovation. And that's how, in the words of Steve Jobs, you dent the universe. Get to the next curve. Okay.
Wow, Guy, it was really illuminating. The way you explained everything, it was amazing. And every piece that you mentioned is always challenging and inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing with us these today. Well, right now we're open for questions regarding your great presentation. And I would like to ask the first one of the questions.
Yes.
And regarding your experience in these different great organizations and companies, what would you say has been like the biggest challenge regarding moving this innovation forward? Like, for example, maybe you have this idea in your mind, and that's one thing. The other thing is just making it come true. So how to push that innovation and move forward in order to produce something concrete or specific?
And this person is inside an existing company already, or starting a company?
I think it's inside a company.
Okay. But
the answer could be for both.
Okay, well, let's take the harder one. The harder one is you're inside a company, and ironically, the more successful the company, perhaps the more hard it is. So let's go back to the example that I cited. Let's suppose that you're the engineer inside Kodak who invented the digital camera, okay? And so you go to your boss and you say to your boss, I have figured out a way that people don't have to buy film anymore. What do you think the Kodak manager would say? The great news, you just put us out of business. And so, in a sense, I think the greatest barrier is probably inertia. If you're selling all the film and all the photographic paper that you can make, and somebody says, "Hey, I got a way people don't have to buy this," it's hard to. It's easy for me to say. It's easy for the quote unquote expert making a speech to university students to say, but it's quite another thing for someone who's making the call inside of Kodak to say, "Yeah, you're right. Let's just cannibalize our business." And the same thing, in a sense, happened to Apple, right? So Apple's making tons and selling tons of Apple IIs, and then we come along with a Macintosh. And now Apple's selling tons of Macintosh, and say, okay, now we're going to iOS. but that's what it takes. And unless you want to be Kodak or Polaroid or Smith Corona typewriter company or digital equipment or Wang word processor, you have to get to the next curve.
Yeah, great point. I mean, that's a great observation. We have a question from Andres Vargas. He says, what's a methodology to test your products when you have a limited budget?
I would assume that he's referring to testing, not in the sense of debugging, but testing in the sense of customer reaction.
I would say.
Yeah.
We don't know, but we can say, yeah.
And I say, I don't know. I'm not big into methodology, the methodology, capital M. I would say just get it out there. I mean, take it to the coffee shop, just put it out there, take it to the student center, whatever it is. I don't think you need to do a whole, regression tests with random samples with control groups and all that. I mean, quite frankly, you could take it home and, do your siblings like it? Because if your siblings don't like it and your parents don't like it or your kids don't like it, you got a problem. You don't need to spend a lot of money to figure that out.
Thank you, Guy. We have a question from Alexandra Bir. She says, can you please give an advice for entrepreneurs in Guatemala and Latin America? Let me tell you a little bit about this. We have a huge number of very young entrepreneurs in this country that are moving forward. I have a great hope on entrepreneurs because I think they challenge some of the things that have been there forever and have they are brave to move forward, even though they don't know if they're going to be successful. So any advice that you can give for them in these minutes that we have together?
Wait, so could you repeat that question? I kind of...
Can you please give an advice for entrepreneurs in Guatemala and Latin America?
Well, I've been to Guatemala twice.
You have to come again.
Yeah, but the extent... Well, first of all, that was a long time ago. And basically, you get off the plane and you go to the orphanage and you get your child. And then you take him or her home and you wake up, you go to the U.S. Embassy, you get your passport or the papers, you go back to the hotel, you go to sleep, you wake up the next morning, you fly to L.A. So that's kind of... it's not like I walked all over your country.
Then you don't know Guatemala.
Yeah, I really don't. But I will say that I have been all over the world, and I think that entrepreneurial spirit is more similar than it is different. It's not like entrepreneurs in Guatemala are much different from the ones in Silicon Valley or Austin, Texas, or Boston, Massachusetts, or Munich, or Hong Kong. I think entrepreneurship is all about seeing the glass as half full, that seeing a growth mindset, that there must be a better way, that they have asked the question, therefore what, and they have come up with an answer that will make people's lives better. Mm-hmm. And so right now, I would make the case that it's probably easier to start a company than ever because of things like cloud-based, right? So before you had to buy roomfuls of servers. Now you sign up with Amazon. And so that is a significant difference. Most of the tools are free or cheap. Timothy said that he kind of, I don't think I'm misquoting him, but he kind of said that, the cost of software is zero. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, it costs something to write the software. It might be close to zero to host it and all that, but he's right. It's not like if you were building a hardware company back in the Ken Olsen days, I mean, you had to buy chips and plants and factories and, all this kind of stuff, softwares, compilers, and some fast computers. So, and I also think that one of the positive things about the pandemic, and there are many negatives, believe me, I know, but one of the positive things is, in a sense, it used to be that there truly was an advantage to being in Silicon Valley, right? You were in the Valley, you were hanging around with entrepreneurs, you're hanging around with venture capitalists, everybody sees each other at the same events and all that. So you were sort of, it's like being in Hollywood. It'd be hard to make a movie out of Guatemala City. It would be much better to be in LA, right? Well, with the pandemic, everybody is a little window on Zoom now. So you can't tell if you're connecting from Guatemala City or if you're connecting from Menlo Park. And so that is a great equalizer. And I don't think that's going to change. The pandemic, I think we can see the light at the end of the tunnel now. But I don't think, we're all going to go back to let's 100,000 of us go into Las Vegas in the first week of January for the Consumer Electronics Show and just hang out with all our buddies coming from all over the world, some of which have different infection rates. So I think that the pandemic is a great equalizer, and investors with capital flowing electronically. I had no idea that so much of it is electronic in Africa. This is a very different world.
Great point. I would like to mention, you mentioned on your number 3 regarding, if I remember correctly, make simple questions.
Yes.
And I just want to connect that with the university as the history of our university says that the university, which was founded 50 years ago, we are in our 50th anniversary, it started with a question. I wanted to say this because, and it was related with why. Why are we poor? And why are we, in this time in that moment, what are these challenges that we are facing? And well, these simple questions. So regarding those simple questions, how would you connect or promote or enhance the possibility of making those questions in your daily work? As you as a team leader, how would you promote that attitude of making questions in your own team?
Well, first, I'm not suggesting that every day you should be asking so many questions, okay? Because at some point you just have to decide, therefore what? Let's make a picture sharing service. On Tuesday you can't decide, why don't we make cyber currency? And then on Wednesday you say, well, why don't we make a new kind of laptop? So once you decide, hopefully the whole company, all the energies behind one question, right? But up to that point, I think it takes curiosity. And I think it's an entrepreneurial spirit that you see the world, the glass as half full, and that there is a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset, that the world can get better, products can get better, you can build a better living for yourself, you can build a better product. Why shouldn't there be a Steve Jobs from Guatemala? I see no reason why not. So why not?
Thank you, Guy. We have a couple of questions that are regarding the same thing, and it's, what is your current biggest challenge in Canva?
Well, I think Canva is doing just extremely well, and I don't take credit for that. I've never worked for a company where there are better people than Canva. So, and they truly do relentlessly pursue perfection. I think for a company that's growing as fast as us, it's always about execution. At some point, it is, once you got the vision, once you've asked the question, therefore what? Once you've got the answer, and once you've got the beginnings of, Canva is now, I've been there 6 years, so it's probably 10 years old. Then it is just, keeping your attention and just execution. It is an execution play at this point.
Great answer. Thank you, Guy. We have a question from a lawyer's point of view. How can you innovate as a lawyer, having so many restrictions regarding laws and processes, things like that?
Oh man, funny story. I went to law school for 2 weeks and quit, so I'm not qualified to answer this question. Law, any industry can have innovation, right? There's new ways of delivering services. Is delivering legal services any different than delivering medical services? it's not like anybody can just start a hospital and start operating on people. And so there are challenges for everything. And if it were easy, more people would do it. I mean, I don't have the answer for that question for the legal market, but I refuse to believe that this is a market that is so tightly controlled, much less so efficient, that nothing else can be done. There's no way. Mm-hmm. There's always a way.
Thank you so much, Guy, for such a great intervention and for answering these questions in a very humble way. We are so delighted to have you here and to learn from you today, and for being with us in Business Day. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. All the best to you. Bye.
Bye. Bueno, llegamos al final de este evento de Business Day 2021. La verdad es que muy felices y muy orgullosos como miembros de la Facultad de Ciencias Económicas y de la Universidad Francisco Marroquín. Nos sentimos verdaderamente orgullosos de haber podido montar el día de hoy un evento que les dio la oportunidad a todos ustedes y a las personas que podrán ver también la grabación de este evento posteriormente, de aprender de 4 personas de clase mundial. Personas que con su experiencia, su conocimiento, con los logros profesionales que han tenido, se han unido a este evento para contribuir con el programa de becas ITA y para contribuir con el nivel pues, empresarial y gerencial de todas aquellas personas que el día de hoy nos acompañaron. Así que quiero agradecerles a cada uno de ustedes y quiero pues literalmente empezar agradeciendo a los 4 conferencistas, de quienes repito sus nombres: René, Scull, Kory, Kogon, Timothy Chu y Guy Kawasaki. La verdad es que es difícil pensar que tuvimos la oportunidad de escuchar a estas 4 personas juntas esta tarde. Les dejamos a cada uno de ustedes que piensen profundamente sobre algunos de estos temas que ellos tocaron el día de hoy, y yo quisiera cerrar con una reflexión de un par de minutos, y creo que tiene que ver con la forma de conectar estas 4 presentaciones que tuvimos oportunidad de ver. Como dijo René, tener los ojos bien abiertos para las señales de las tendencias que están alrededor de nosotros. Cada una de estas tendencias, algunas que podemos notar con datos concretos y algunas simplemente con observación que podemos ver en diferentes medios de comunicación, nos hacen constantemente pensar qué cosas diferentes debemos hacer como empresarios, como gerentes, como líderes, en cualquiera de los campos en que cada uno de nosotros nos desarrollemos. En segundo lugar, estando pues verdaderamente consciente de esas tendencias como líderes, estar centrados en nuestro carácter y en la forma como ese carácter, con un mindset verdaderamente enfocado y diferente, nos puede ayudar a mover nuestros comportamientos, a actuar de una manera diferente, y esto es todo lo que necesitamos para crear un entorno de confianza en donde cada una de las personas con las que compartimos, sean miembros de nuestros equipos o personas con las que compartimos todos los días, también puedan moverse hacia la dirección de un alto compromiso para buscar mejores resultados. Como dijo Timothy, él nos hablaba de, en vez de estar pensando o enfocándonos en los edificios, los activos, pensemos más bien en las personas. Y al decir pensar en las personas, piensa en ti. Tienes la oportunidad tú de cambiar la forma en que prácticamente armas ese camino a un futuro que tú tienes capacidad de ver. Queremos hacerles la invitación a cada uno de ustedes que piensen justamente en ese futuro que cada uno tiene la capacidad de crear. Y bueno, Timothy compartió algunas de esas tecnologías, retándonos cómo desde un país como Guatemala podríamos surgir de una manera diferente y potenciar muchas de las iniciativas en las cuales estamos a otro nivel. Y cerramos con Guy Kawasaki inspirándonos sobre tener la capacidad de tener un growth mindset, una forma de pensar sobre crecimiento. Creo que algunas veces nos limitamos y me encantó la forma en que planteó la pandemia como un gran ecualizador, algo que de alguna manera nos iguala en pantallas en una plataforma como esta, y que en realidad no importa desde qué país estemos, nuestras capacidades, nuestra visión y nuestro compromiso es prácticamente lo que va a hacer la diferencia. Así que en la innovación, las buenas preguntas, el ensayo y error, y el que de verdad estemos siempre en búsqueda de una evolución continua, nos va a llevar pues a más y mejores descubrimientos. La verdad es que los invitamos a todos a reflexionar sobre las ideas compartidas el día de hoy y quiero cerrar agradeciendo de nuevo a nuestros patrocinadores, sin los cuales no hubiese sido posible pues hacer este evento. Semaco, CBC, Cementos Progreso, Pacífico, Banco Industrial, Bisanet y FranklinCovey. Y en los media partners o media collaborators, o sea, los medios de comunicación que estuvieron contribuyendo con nosotros, el departamento de New Media de la UFM, quien está a cargo de toda la realización digital del evento, Prensa Libre, Canal de Antigua y Guatemala.com. Verdaderamente muy agradecidos por habernos acompañado esta noche, que puedan disfrutar de lo que aprendieron el día de hoy y que nos acompañen el próximo año en este evento Businessday 2021. Cierro haciendo la reflexión sobre el programa de Beca Cita. Reitero que para nosotros, cada uno de los miembros de este programa, con más de 200 graduados, verdaderamente han hecho la diferencia en nuestras vidas y hacen la diferencia en cada uno de los lugares en donde se encuentran. Quiero honrar a cada uno de los miembros del programa, quiero agradecer a cada uno de los donantes de este programa e invitarlos a cada uno de ustedes que se sumen a estas donaciones continuas que tenemos alrededor del programa de Beca Cita, el que le abre oportunidades de educación universitaria a personas de muchísimo talento que no tendrían la oportunidad de estudiar en la universidad. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos, muy buenas noches a todos, ha sido un gusto estar aquí con ustedes.
Hey. La red en donde puedes transferir tan fácil como enviar un emoji. Solamente tienes que descargar o actualizar Ve en Línea App. Ingresar a la opción de transferencias móviles. Completar tu perfil cargando tu mejor fotografía y seleccionando tu cuenta principal. Agrega como favoritos a los contactos que desees y listo. Ahora podrás enviar o recibir transferencias acreditadas directamente a tu cuenta principal utilizando tu número de celular. ¿Qué esperas para unirte? Invita a tus amigos a registrarse en transferencias móviles desde Ve en Línea App y transfiéreles con tan solo conocer su número de celular. Banco Industrial, siempre de tu lado, siempre hacia adelante.
Creemos que una gran nación empieza en el hogar. Es solo ahí, en el hogar, donde la palabra futuro puede adquirir un nuevo significado. Con esta visión en el corazón, existimos sabiendo que cada acción que tomamos debe hacernos mejores y tener un impacto positivo en las comunidades en las que operamos. Desde una sonrisa de bienvenida hasta cuando apoyamos a nuestros artesanos en su emprendimiento. Somos mejores cuando participamos activamente, forjando la promesa de un futuro mejor para nuestros niños. Guatemala no es solo nuestro país, es nuestro hogar. Y cada día tenemos la oportunidad de ser padres, madres, hijos, hermanos, en un hogar que se merece todo. Trabajemos duro, llevemos un poquito de honor y amor a nuestro hogar. Aguate, nuestro hogar.
Llegó la nueva aplicación Tap & Go de Bisanet para que puedas cobrar con tarjeta sin contacto desde tu celular. Comunícate con nosotros. Bisanet Guatemala.
En Grupo A, generamos el contenido que necesitas para conectar con las audiencias clave, con más de 11 años de experiencia. Grupo A está conformado por diversos medios que nos han posicionado como uno de los líderes en el mercado de la comunicación. Somos el socio comercial ideal para cumplir tus objetivos. Nos hemos ganado la confianza de los hogares guatemaltecos y queremos ser el medio para que tú llegues a ellos. Logra tus objetivos con Grupo A.
Que uno da a la juventud de mi comunidad, porque el hecho de que una persona de ese lugar donde las oportunidades muchas veces se ven cerradas, donde las oportunidades tal vez ni existen, y ver que una persona ha logrado esto, ha servido a muchos jóvenes que puedan creer en sus sueños y que sepan que hay medios y que hay formas de poder alcanzar lo que uno se propone.
Camadita es mejor que ganarse la lotería. Ha sido una de las mayores bendiciones que he recibido en mi vida. Lo que el programa ha hecho por mí yo no se los podría pagar ni aunque les devolviera todo el dinero que eso ha significado. Todos esos intangibles que me han dado y que me han permitido cambiar mi vida, cambiar la vida de mi familia y poder de alguna manera ayudar a otras personas que han estado en mi círculo de influencia.
A las personas que hicieron una donación, o muy grande o muy pequeña, para que yo pudiera estudiar, lo que les diría es que no me alcanzaría la vida y ni los años que Dios me dé para agradecerles por lo que hicieron por mí, por mi familia, por mi comunidad y por el país. Hicieron una inversión y esa inversión yo me comprometo a seguir retornándola con cada vez mejores cosas para las comunidades, para mi familia, para mí misma e incluso para los próximos becados que puedan venir a este programa ITA.